Okay, we are on the air. Thank you. This is a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of New Canaan, Connecticut, in the form of a meeting of the Planning and Plan of Conservation and Development Subcommittee of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Today is Thursday, December 14, 2023. It's a little after 7 o'clock and we're in Town Hall. I will start by calling the roll. Commissioner Benton is here. Stay out loud here. Thank you.
Say yes.
Say yes. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Commissioner Herring is not here. Commissioner Nielsen.
Here.
Commissioner Radman.
Here.
Commissioner Turner.
Here.
Here. Okay. Commissioner Radman, you will be seated for Commissioner Herring.
Okay.
Thank you. The agenda, the four-part agenda. First part, discussion on housing in downtown. A few opening comments. Today, we are taking a deeper dive in consultation with the New Canaan community into housing and our downtown. Your input will be crucial to this subcommittee as we proceed with our update of the town's plan of conservation and development. We're glad you're here. It is clear that these are important matters to New Canaan as they are important to this subcommittee. We continue to be dedicated to an open, interactive process involving all voices. We hope the people of New Canaan will continue to be generous with their wisdom tonight. Please help us help our town. I'm excited to discover what we will learn together as we hear our neighbors' insights and ideas. I hope we will have robust and friendly discussions on these weighty matters, with those discussions resulting in the very best that New Canaan can offer. A few suggestions. 1, please get to the point quickly. 2, if you have detailed exhibits or language to share, it might be best to email those to the planning office in Town Hall. All information will be entered into the public record and reviewed by this subcommittee and our consultants. In addition, this way you can ensure that what you want to say will be precisely received. 3, please be specific with goals and concepts. We seek clear and actionable ideas. And 4, please also be clear on priorities. If everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. Furthermore, remember that the town only has so much money and so much bandwidth, and it might be best if we focus our resources on those matters that are most urgent. Our collective task as a subcommittee is to make New Canaan's updated plan of conservation and development a living, action-oriented document which contains a carefully prioritized set of goals and means to those goals that encompass the best long-term vision for our town. Vision that will make our wonderful community even stronger, more resilient, and more welcoming for all. It is a privilege to serve the people of New Canaan. Before we open things up to the public, I want to review procedure. Given 2 different, albeit related topics tonight, we will start with housing and then proceed to downtown. We will alternate between recognizing people who are physically in this room and on Zoom to ensure balance. If you wish to be recognized, please raise your physical or virtual hand and the chair will recognize you. As you please come to the desk here and one of these chairs, the microphones here and elsewhere do not work, just the microphone in front of Sarah Carey and the microphone in front of me. They do pick it up, but if you're sitting over there or at the podium, it won't pick it up, so you have to sit right here. They're in the process of rewiring the room. As you can see, some of the old TV screens are down. We have new ones being installed, so there's a tech redo in the room, and sort of we're in mid-process. Also, if you do choose to speak, please remember to state your name when you begin. Furthermore, if you want them, brownies have been brought. They are gluten-free and nut-free. They are not flavor-free. Please take some and enjoy.
Don't forget our award one.
They're multi-award winning, excuse me. Thank you, Commissioner. They are multi-award winning. Truly, they're entered into various agricultural fairs in Connecticut. Anyway, Zoning Chief Carey here has some housing slides she wants to share, and we will start by recognizing her and then open it up to the public. So
Okay,
the floor is yours.
thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to
The screen right here.
Yeah, I'm going to share some slides just to kind of go over general housing terms, just so you know if there's a term that gets thrown out that you're not familiar with. Hopefully I've covered it beforehand, and I'm going to be going through some various types of housing that exist in town already, just so you have some ideas of what exists in New Canaan as of 2023. Can everyone see it all right? Okay. So first, just some general definitions of different types of housing. So the most common in New Canaan would be a single family home. That's where one family resides in a home. You know, it's very common in New Canaan. And then below that, we have accessory dwelling units, which people may be a little less familiar with. So an accessory dwelling unit would be on a property with a single family home, and that could be an in-law apartment where your basement is finished. It could be a small structure in a backyard where there's a small apartment. Those are getting more common in the last 10 years, I would say, and they're allowed in New Canaan via zoning permit, sometimes via special permit other times. So they are starting to pop up more. And then you have a two-family home where two families reside in typically two apartments within one structure. We have a lot of those in downtown that are older. There are some new ones getting built as well. And then after that, everything else is multifamily, but there are many different types of multifamily. So middle housing, which is probably the least common, not only in New Canaan, but in other places in the country, that's typically 3 to 5 units attached or detached on one parcel. Then you have condominiums, which would be similar to apartments, but they're owned separately, and townhomes next are those where you share one wall with someone, similar to condominiums. And then you have apartments, which is multiple units in large buildings. And then mixed use, we have some of that in downtown where you have apartments or condos above retail or office space. We're starting to see more of that. And then just some additional terms that come up a lot in zoning that people may reference today. So building coverage on any lot in town. If you have a certain size parcel, you're only allowed a certain size foundation essentially on your property. And so that gets regulated, and that's what building coverage is. And then a setback is where can those structures go on your property. So every single lot has certain setbacks. It depends on what zone you're in. So 2-acre zones very common in New Canaan. They have a 35-foot setback for where your house can go, where accessory structures can go. Stories are going to come up sometimes. So in residential zones, you're allowed 2.5 stories. You know, I think a story is self-explanatory, but a half story, that's typically your attic, where it can only be half the size of the story below it. So if someone says 2.5 stories, you may think of a home as 3 stories, but in town, it's really only 2.5 because that attic space is smaller than anything below it. And then you'll also have some detached versus attached, and that's most common in 2 families. You could have a detached 2-family where there are 2 separate units on the same parcel, or attached is where they have a common wall. And then finally, we have floor area ratio. We don't regulate that in New Canaan, but it's just an important idea to bring up, where in towns like Ridgefield, Greenwich, and Darien, they actually limit. So we limit building coverage. So you could have a 5,000 square foot foundation, let's say, but then you could have a finished basement, a finished first floor, a finished second floor, and then a finished half story on top. In other towns, they have floor area ratio, where you could have a 5,000 square foot foundation, but your home could only be 10,000 square feet total or something like that. So we don't do that in New Canaan, but that is a strategy that's used in other towns. That's something to keep in mind. So that's hopefully the most information I will throw at you in one slide.
I can mention one thing. The floor area ratio deals with, in effect, you can't have a very, very large house in a small lot.
Exactly.
So it limits exactly how big the house can be in a particular property. That's what it does. Exactly. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Thank you. So now just to kind of talk about what's in New Canaan before I show a bunch of pictures, so there's less information thrown at you. But so in New Canaan, as far as density goes, I'm going to break it up into single/2 family residences and neighborhoods versus multifamily. So in New Canaan, the lowest density that we have is there's about one house for every 2 to 4 acres. So that's the 2 in the 4 acre zone. Below that, we have some medium density, which would be about 2 to 3 houses per acre. And so we have a half-acre residence zone, a third-acre residence zone where every house is on a lot that's a half-acre size or a third of an acre size. And then lower than that, or higher than that, I would rather say, you have 4 to 6 houses per acre, and that's in your B residence zone, A residence zone, right in downtown. So you'll have a mix of single-family homes and 2-family homes, and that is mostly on quarter-acre or smaller lots. And then going to multifamily, lower density is going to be about 7 to 12 units per acre. There are a lot of condo and townhome complexes in town that are in that 7 to 12 units per acre. Medium density, we have a little less of that, but that's 12 to 19 units per acre. I'll have some examples of these later. And then high density would be 20 units or more per acre. We only have 1 or 2 developments like that. And just to clarify, this is in New Canaan, so the definition of low versus medium versus high density really varies from town to town, city to city. Obviously, 20 units per acre in New York City is not high density. But you know, in New Canaan, that's very high density. So this is all relative to New Canaan. So what you see in the street when you're driving around New Canaan, what you notice most is probably the size of structures and the height of structures. And so in your single family, 2-family structures, they're maxed at 40 to 45 feet tall. So there's not much variation as what the maximum is for single and 2-family homes. For multifamily, there's a lot of variety. So a multifamily, so like a condo complex in certain zones that are older, you can't have one taller than 40 feet. So they're not as noticeable because they tend to blend in right next to your single family home because they're the same height. But there are some more dense developments that have been built over recent years that are higher in height, where we've allowed 55 and up to 67 feet in height. So we do have some taller structures in town, but the vast majority of structures are maxed out at about 45 feet in height. And so then lastly, just some housing trends to kind of talk about, to put in perspective of how we got to where we're at in 2023. Single family and 2-family homes, there was a huge boom everywhere in the country post World War II, but in New Canaan, we saw about 1,000 units per decade from 1950 to 1979. So I think in 1950, there were about 3,000 homes or 2,000 homes in New Canaan, and by 1979, that was up to 5,000, 6,000. So that was when there was a large increase, and those homes tended to be smaller, 1.5 to 2 stories. And there are still a lot of them, especially in downtown. But what we're seeing now is as you all may have noticed, most of our land in New Canaan is, you know, occupied with existing structures. So all of these new units that get built tend to be from tearing down those older structures and creating new. And what we're seeing in this new construction post 2000 is that builders and residents are trying to max out the lot. So whereas before in 1950 or 1970, you may have been able to, on a lot, you could build a 3,000 square foot foundation, you may have only built a 1,500 square foot foundation. But now, right off the bat, people tend to be maxing it out and going as large as they can. And then finally, for multifamily, just some trends that are going on. Most of our low density multifamily, so the condo complexes that you see all in downtown, most of those were constructed pre-2000s. And again, similar trend when people are building new multifamily, it's trying to max out whatever you can on the lot, for better or for worse. And then recently on mixed use projects downtown, we're seeing developers trying to minimize their commercial space. Our 2 most recent ones that got approved, the Houston Lane development and the Burtis Avenue development, they're minimizing what commercial space they provide in their developments. So those are just some trends. And now just to kind of provide you all with images of what is around town, now that I've just kind of explained it all in words, these are just photos of what exists. And myself and other town staff just took these photos around town from the street. So this is very common, low density, 1 unit per 2 or 4 acres, just some larger homes. We also do see some smaller homes in
And
that.
Sarah, just to put on the record, the
Yep.
larger homes in the 2 and 4 acre zone are basically New Canaan is a series of concentric circles of density. So, you know, downtown is the most dense, and then the 2 and 4 acre zone, for those who aren't familiar, is further away
Yeah.
from the downtown core.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Most of the 4 acre zone is really sort of in the north.
Yeah.
North. The north of Greenlee, sort of that area.
Yes, but then the 2 acre zone is all of south of the Merritt. So there's no 4 acre zone south of the Merritt, but
Right.
there's 2 acre. So,
In addition, on the lots, there are rules on how the lot is shaped. So you have the big circle and the little circle and other types of things. So it's not a bowling alley shape, but it's sort of square-ish is how many
Well,
of the lots.
it's a,
In
it's a
theory.
circle diameter and a street frontage.
Yeah,
That dictates lot.
it is, but there are a lot of old lots in New Canaan, so we have a lot of non-conforming to shape.
Right.
So any new lot that was created probably post 1950 conforms, but pre 1950, it was kind of, you know, whatever got
pre-zoning.
away with, yes. So these are just some larger homes in our less dense neighborhoods, and then there are less small homes in the larger lots, in the 2 and 4 acre zone. We did find a few, but the vast majority are larger homes in those 2 and 4 acre zones. And so now, just getting closer to downtown, this is just a view of a street in a more medium density neighborhood. So as you can see, you're starting to see more houses close together. There are still some trees, but it is getting a little tighter. And so this is in the 3rd acre zone, the street in particular. And now this is what we would consider a more high density neighborhood for single and 2 family homes. This is the B residence zone, where you're having 1 to 2 unit houses on a 1/4 acre or smaller lot. And so you see it's much tighter now. And then these are just examples of some large single family homes in high density neighborhoods. So again, this is in downtown. You can see that there are houses right next door to the other. And these are all obviously newer construction. And then this is what more low dense or smaller homes look like in high density neighborhoods. Obviously the houses are still relatively close together, but there is a little less loom factor going on. And these are all older homes, kind of speaking to the trend that new homes are very much so tending to be larger. And then to get into 2 families, these are just some images of what 2 families can look like all around town, with varying decades in which they were built. The one on the top left is likely a 1960s or 1970s build, and the one below it, I think, is the 2000s or the 2010s. And then these are examples of detached 2 family homes for anyone who was struggling to picture it. So in each image, that's 1 parcel of land, and we consider it by definition a 2 family, but they are separate units and they appear like single family homes. They're just much tighter together.
And Sarah, that's pretty uncommon elsewhere.
Correct. So
That's
this
kind
is
of a New
very
Canaan.
unique to New Canaan. There aren't a lot even in New Canaan. But it is something that the regulations allow if you have a certain size lot in the B residence zone, which is again the first zone in downtown bordering all the business sections.
These 2 are on Seminary, as I remember. Also, if you know, on Park Street, right by the Richmond Hill
These
lot,
are-
you have
these are
4
the
houses that are very close together. Used to be older houses, so that's a similar type of concept to this.
Yes. Okay, and so now middle housing, there aren't many examples in New Canaan of middle housing, which is again 3 to 5 units. And the term middle housing comes from it being in the middle between 2 single family homes or 2 family homes. It's kind of a new planning term and trend to, show how to fill in the gaps of necessary housing that's missing in town. But so these are just examples of that. And now getting into more multifamily, these are examples of medium density apartment and condo complexes in town. All 3 of these have a density of about 10 to 11 units per acre, which I think is very interesting to see because all 3 of these complexes are very unique, but they're the same density. So I think it's important to understand and visualize that you can have the same density, but it looks very different in the street. And so this is an example of a more high density multifamily development. This was completed in 1994. This is right on Locust Avenue. You wouldn't necessarily realize that this is 22 units per acre. This is actually our second highest density development in town, which I didn't know until I put this presentation together. So I think that's very interesting to understand how density really depends on how things are built.
Where is that location?
This is on Locust.
So is that the village?
Yeah, the village.
They're right behind,
Yeah.
Cross Street behind, it used to be a,
There's an
essentially a
entrance off of
lawnmower company
Summer.
there that tore it all down.
Well, that,
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's tucked
so I
in
think
there.
this was built as an 830G project back in the 90s.
it's tucked behind the brick building on the corner, right?
Yes.
Part of it's facing Locust, but also if you go down New Avenue, I think
Yeah.
it's just off there, and you can cut into essentially a cul-de-sac to access some of the internal
Yeah.
units.
And
But
then
it's townhouses that put together. Lots of
Um,
townhouses.
And then this is the most dense development we have in New Canaan at 29 units per acre, which was developed in 2017, 2018. Just, as another example of the varying types of housing we do in fact have in town. This is on Park Street, cornered with Maple Street. And then getting into the affordable housing, Canaan Parish is an example of more medium density development. Actually, it's about 19 units per acre. And again, this is just relative to New Canaan. I've kind of benchmarked it at 20 units per acre. It tends to be more dense in New Canaan, everything less tends to be more medium. And so this is 19 units per acre. And then
I would also notice that if you ever been in, anyone who's been in here, they're really lovely apartments. They really are gorgeous. And there's also, I think, a community garden, and there's an area for children to play in. So that was built in to make it much more livable. And so that takes up space. You can decrease density, but they wanted a livability issue for these units. And that was part of the planning for
Yeah.
this.
And then more affordable, this is senior housing. This is the schoolhouse apartments. It's about 18 units per acre. It's 40 units total, and reusing an old school building. Just as another example. And then Millport, this is phase 2 of Millport. This would, based on my definitions, be more higher density at 22 units per acre, which it is interesting to think about that Millport, while it's shorter in height than Canaan Parish, is actually higher density than Canaan Parish. So, really keep in mind that while density does say one thing, it doesn't, just because you have a taller building doesn't mean it's as dense as a shorter structure, just depending on, the sizes of apartments, how large the lot is, how much green space is on the lot. So it really does vary.
I'll also add, though, I think that Canaan Parish had some wetlands down
They
by the
did,
pond.
yes,
So
they did.
even though it's got a bigger parcel of land, they could build on a smaller piece. So even though the density number comes out lower, it's because they can only build on a
Yes.
smaller portion than the entire parcel that we're using.
Yes.
The wetlands, so an issue.
You need to consider that there's parking at the other facility at grade level.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
True, parking
Yeah, yeah.
below the structure.
Therefore, that's why it's higher.
Yeah.
yeah.
Excuse me.
There's also Canaan Parish, there's ledge and some other things that you have to deal with, but the wetlands issue is also an issue, for example, in the 4-acre zone. If you've been in that part of town, which I assume you have, there are a lot of rivers and creeks that you have to deal with, and there's setbacks from those, and there's a lot of wetlands there. It's also a watershed area. You go into the goes into the reservoir, so those are other considerations you have to think
Yes.
about.
Okay, and then final slide. These are just some examples of mixed-use developments in town. So the top left and bottom right are already constructed mixed-use developments in town that were developed 5 to 7 years ago, I would say. And then the bottom left, top right are 2 developments that are either under construction that are mixed use or are in the permitting process.
The one in the upper right, that is being built just off on Heritage Hill.
On
That's,
Houston
part-
Lane.
Heritage Hill
Yeah.
Road. The one on the lower left is the artist rendition of you're looking at Cherry Street and Burtis Avenue as the corner. And this was approved, but it has not yet been built. Though there are demolition notices up on many of the buildings in that area, but that's a artistic plan of what they're planning and what was approved.
And so as anyone comes up to speak, if they would like me to pull up a slide or a photo, just let me know, but I will stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, also, if anyone who is on Zoom, if you could be sure to mute yourself and turn off your camera. If you do wish to be recognized, again, please raise your virtual hand. At that point, turn on your camera and unmic yourself or unmute yourself, and then we'll also can hear you. Fair enough. Okay, thank you, Ms. Carey. We will now open it to the public. Let us start with anyone in the room who would like to speak, and then we'll transfer over and choose someone from Zoom. So if you would like to contribute or say anything, ask a question, just raise your hand. Anyone? Could you, please, you have
I'd like
to,
to speak to downtown.
sure, okay, okay.
Why it's hesitant.
Okay, we can, if it's on housing to do it downtown, we would do that. Otherwise,
Specifically
for
downtown.
business, we're going to defer that to later. But there is housing downtown, so if you want to discuss that. Anyone else would like to speak? Please come up. You have to sit right here. I remember you want to talk about smaller houses and foot area ratios, so we added that with you in mind. So your comments have not gone unnoticed.
Sarah Vandervoort, 439 Cheese Spring Road. I think it was alluded to in the presentation that we now seem to have a town with condos and some multifamily homes downtown. But if the moment you get out of downtown, nearly all the smaller houses seem to have disappeared. If you're looking for a ranch house, it's difficult to find. And I've been talking to a number of people who, like myself, are retired, and they're saying, you know what we would really like is to have a smaller house, but they've all disappeared. And, you know, I've sort of just been getting the impression from other people around town that, you know, it's great when you've got a great big house and you've got 2 or 3 kids home, but at a certain point, there are single people and there are retired couples who would like a nice small ranch house. And we were talking about this, and you know, the option comes up. I know that you can put in an auxiliary dwelling in some cases, but in a 2-acre zone, if there aren't wetlands, would it be possible for the town to think about in the larger zones, or of, well, a 1-acre zone or a, you know, 2 or 4-acre zone, that if coverage issues could be addressed, that maybe in some cases 2 smaller houses could be put on a lot rather than 1 large house. Because, you know, at some point, you know, not everybody's going to want to heat and light and use as many square feet as most of these houses have now become. I mean, I've lived in town for 30 years, and, you know, every year the houses seem to get on steroids and get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's my point, that consideration could be given to maybe splitting some lots and making smaller houses available.
Yeah, as Ms. Carey noted, that one of the ways that can be done technically is through foot area ratio regulations, which we don't have, but other towns do. But essentially, that would say in a certain lot, holding coverage constant, so it's how big your foundation is it a 1.5 bath, 3-bedroom, you know, cape, or is it a 4-bath, 5-bedroom, something else that goes up 2.5 stories? You can put that on the same foundation. The foot area ratio would be the regulator here, and that would be one way to do it.
Yeah,
Should we
I'm just
choose to
saying
do
that,
so?
you know, if we're looking at this for the next 10 years, is there a possibility, you know, of allowing lots to split for smaller houses? And just realizing that, yes, as you say, there are setbacks and there are wetlands, but, you know, that this might be an option so that some smaller houses could be available in this town, because really the option now seems to be a large house or a condo. There's just not much in between.
Yeah, a lot of the smaller houses, to my understanding, I think it's about 17% of the housing stock is condo co-op, something like that. It's much
Yeah.
bigger than people, I think, realize, something like that. It's a lot. So people who have that interest. So many people will downsize and they'll move into a condo or a townhouse, which are smaller. They're not necessarily tiny, but you know, I've been in any number of townhouses and they're usually 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, small living room.
But maybe they're downsizing to them because they haven't got another option.
No.
I mean, a realtor was telling me that up on Cheespring Road where I live, there's a ranch house listed. It's well over $1 million. It's because people, you know, want ranch houses all of a sudden because one floor living and, you know, there are not many available anymore.
Okay.
So anyway,
Thank you.
I'd like to think
No.
that something might happen. on
And
that.
thank you for coming 3
Yeah,
times.
thanks for coming 3 times. Yes. You came to the right one, Today's Housing, so we got it. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak? Please.
Angela Jameson, 1370 Clonesmith Road. And firstly, thank you for holding these sessions. I think it's very important that we all have the opportunity to hear what everybody is thinking about how New Canaan may develop over the next 10 years. So as far as housing is concerned, I think we have to be very cognizant of the fact that there is an acute housing shortage in the state and in Fairfield County. And one way or another, New Canaan is going to be drawn into helping to meet that shortage. And as we all know, New Canaan is a very expensive place to live. There are a lot of people who work here or in neighboring towns, providing invaluable services, perhaps running businesses, and they cannot afford to live in New Canaan. So we need to think of ways in which we can make New Canaan more affordable for more people. And I believe that that's going to involve us having to accept greater densification and redevelopment of certain portions, particularly of downtown, and to be very creative. And I would like to see town government being more proactive in the actual planning of what can be done, and to really lead charge in terms of coming up with ideas. There will need to be public-private partnerships, so the town does not own the land. And perhaps we have to think about land swaps. Perhaps we actually have to negotiate directly with those who own land in downtown, so that we end up with something that looks good, as well as providing affordable housing for those who want to live in New Canaan. And I think mixed use is an important contributor here, perhaps more than we have had in the past in zoning, but certainly multifamily housing of an attractive nature needs to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak on housing? Oh, sorry, we should probably ask on Zoom. I followed my own rule. We haven't, let's check Zoom because I haven't done that yet and I should have. So is anyone on Zoom interested in speaking? Any hands raised?
No hands raised.
No hands raised? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Amy Gilday. I live at 330 Elm Street, and I thank you for holding this hearing. I think we're all really concerned about our town and trying to maintain its character while making sure that people have affordable places to live. I think that there is an opportunity to put together, I know we've got the commission now, to look for land that's suitable and to build nice, but more to scale places for people to live. And I think it's important that we have, instead of affordable housing, to me, it's almost workplace housing for people that are working in the town or work for the government, because we want them to be welcome into our community. I live across the street from 751 Weed Street, and the issue there is that, not that it's, I welcome affordable housing. I have a daughter that's a teacher. I want her to have a great place to live. But that the building is so unsuitable for the piece of property, and there's so many different safety concerns that have been addressed, and you've done a great job in holding the hearings and listening to all the input from the community. But I know that there are some people who are very concerned and really want to help. And Save Reed Street would be one organization. And I know that, I think there is a affordable housing commission in place that should be, I think 10 members, right? That should be,
It's not in place.
Not in
yet,
place
but
yet.
It's in works.
but
Soon.
it should be in place soon, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That there have been some really capable people who have just signed up for that task. So thank you for asking. And I guess to me, there's a lot of safety concerns. Traffic has become almost untenable. And also Irwin Park is such a treasure. If you're gonna put a huge development across the street that's gonna use that for open space, how's that gonna impact that park that a lot of people know and use? But thank you very much for having this hearing, and your time and efforts are greatly appreciated.
Please stay 1 minute. I thank you for your comments, Ms. Gadet. You know, I think there's I guess a sense that building very large structures in residential neighborhoods tends to have some externalities that some people are less enthused about. And what I'm hearing is that perhaps it should be done more in the center of town where there is sewer. So let's utilize that more and not spread it out too much. But I hear you on that. I mean, I'm not suggesting these are where things should go, but in any real estate development, you have to answer 4 questions. 1, where do you want to put it? 2, what do you want to put there? And 3rd, how are you going to finance it? Is certainly one of the, and also how much money you want to spend. Usually the financing is part equity and a lot of debt. For affordable housing, where it's deeded affordable, it tends to be low-income housing tax credits and subsidized debt and donations from various people, such as we're going to rent them the land for $1 a year or something like this. So essentially you're subsidizing it. But if you think about downtown, so just higher and better use, and, you know, you look at the development that Ms. Carey showed on Burtis, Burtis and Cherry, where it's going to be some retail at grade level, because Burtis is a nice street in my opinion.
Yes.
And it's going to be partly affordable, at least 15% affordable under our rules. It has to be. We've made that rule. And it's a lovely, our opinion anyway, it's a lovely development. We made a decision on that.
It.
But anyway, we already made that call. But if you think about more downtown, I mean, also you look where the yoga studio is on Park, right by Merrill Lynch. There are 1 family or 1 bedroom units above. People don't know that. We had a application maybe it was about 3 years ago, to convert some offices on Main Street north of Elm into 1-bedroom apartments. One other thing is that, and I think it's the A retail zone, they have any apartment which could be up in the upper level has to be maximum 750 feet.
Yep.
Yeah, that's our rule. Now, is that a good rule? That means a 1-bed. Well, should we revisit that? We can do that, not we, but the Planning and Zoning Commission can change that under its legislative powers. Should we rethink that? Okay, maybe. But if you look around, you have Crossing Biddy, which is a lot of land, some older buildings, you know, and that's a big parcel. You look at Richmond Hill lot. Do we really need the lot anymore? Is it a surplus asset? Could be sold to a developer in an appropriate manner. Take the cash, use that to subsidize affordable housing. Look at, you know, the office building where the police is now temporarily. Well, what's going to happen to that office building afterwards? You have the medical office on East Avenue, right by the affordable housing at the corner, right by the pond. Now there's a big hill there, which makes it tricky logistically, but it's on a state highway and right next to what is now still affordable housing. How do you think about that? Look at issues on Pine Street. We have some empty big buildings there. The whole Grove and Acme, those, you may not know, those older buildings between the 2 office buildings on Grove Street, right? those three buildings, they were purchased by the town, I think. And so, you know, what to do with those?
I
You-
don't know who owns it.
Lots of property.
Yeah, TD Bank building, every time I walk by there, I think, boy, that'd be a great place to maybe put up a nice building.
Well, we have actually, there's an application before the commission, so cannot comment on
Oh,
that.
no.
We
No,
can't
no,
comment.
just, you know, there's so many places you
Sure
notice
do.
when you walk around town.
Here you, I mean, you think about Acme, you know, you have any number of in more urban areas where you have a grocery store on ground level and they have some housing above. How many branch banks have been torn down in town? A lot. So you know, where Stewart's Wine used to be a Webster Bank branch. So you have the TD branch, which is at the corner of former TD one. There are other ones. Think about Locust lot. And behind it, as you know, to the north, there's a single family home, sort of a big open parking area. And then I think it's two buildings that are apartments, maybe about half a dozen apartments that are not the most modern buildings. You know, to the extent you could do something partnership with whoever owns all that and the town, if you double the space from Locust to those other areas, you can't just double the number of units, but there are things you can do on bigger plots that you just can't do on smaller lots. So again, that's right downtown and very walkable. So there's a lot of issues, as you said, about working with private landlords. You can always condemn. Town can do it, we can't do it for affordable housing. But these are some of the things to think about. So I hope this subcommittee and the commission as a whole, as well as the town, will think very diversely about what can be done, because I think when we've listened to the 830 other applications, people say, well, let's put it in the downtown area. Many people have said so, but that's a good idea or not. It's certainly an idea to think about where there is infrastructure, and some highways are state highways. So you have that too. Thank you for the comment, Ticket Brown, if you like. But
I have a
Only
follow-up.
this
if I
sorry
may.
for this,
That's very
please.
nice.
But I appreciate you bringing the topic up. I'm sorry.
Just a
Commissioner.
clarifying question. So I agree when your comment, nice at-scale places, and you define it as not affordable, but really for workforce housing. When you think back to Ms. Carey's comments and the different options, what would those options be in your mind?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part about
Oh.
the options, but I would, if I were having a daughter who's a teacher, you know, you want people to have a nice place to live, that they can have a family if they want to. You want them to become part of the fabric of the community. I think someplace that's manageable, that isn't, that is 100% also affordable housing, instead of a developer who's really doing the 30% affordable housing. And then the 70% is all profit to him. I think that I have an issue with that, the way, of course, we can't control that, the way that legislation is written. But I would think of smaller buildings that are walkable, that people would be proud and happy to live in. And hopefully when they come and live here, and we have our teachers and firemen and people that live in town, they want to stay and they become part of the fabric of this community.
Thank you. So in I think the slides earlier, that would be described more as the mixed unit housing. Is
And
that-
I think the mixed unit, I think that's great to have retail on the bottom floor and housing on the top floor.
Mixed unit multifamily is kind of what I heard. Is that how you would describe it?
If I look at the mixed use that we have in town, there's the one on used to be a bank branch, again, another bank branch that went away. They're going away, let me tell you, I'm involved in it. But anyway, you have Red Grape there
Right.
at Grade, which is a very nice store, and you have two condos above it, and there are 5 townhouses on Forest Street. Then sort of kitty corner is the one that Ms. Carey showed, which was a condo on Forest Street that's been very popular. So And I think the one in Curtis that we approved is a nice one. We approved it anyway, so. But, you know, those seem to be very popular, where you have still the retail, so you get the street life with restaurants and so forth, and you still have housing above that's at scale and attractively designed, as I think these other developments are. So it certainly can be done, and in a very walkable way. So that's certainly something to think about. One of the challenges in development is land assembly. So if you have multiple owners of various plots, is how do I get it all together so I have a plot that works? This is one of the ways that a town can participate in something like that. And whether they choose or not to, or how to do it, is certainly a different issue, but certainly that has happened in other jurisdictions where they can help achieve.
It's Commissioner Turner. Commissioner Chris, what you state is very true. It's correct. But I think the point really is affordable workplace, workforce housing. That price of that development is way beyond workforce. So I think, you know, we should probably talk about the financing side of it. You know, a P3, a public-private partnership, might be the way to go, so that we could subsidize this very expensive housing and still have the quality design and be in the right area. So I'd like to suggest that we bring into this discussion possible development scenarios. Who's going to finance?
Thank you, Commissioner Turner. Workforce is also begged the question, you know, which workforce are we talking about? And how much compensation do they have? And
Well,
so.
I'm sorry, but we were talking about a school teacher. So I think that sets the.
That's certainly one workforce, but there are also people who are managing stores downtown and performing other functions, not just civil servants. And so there are those people to consider also. Once you're out of what's designated affordable and someone who is by law able to apply for a subsidized unit, that's sort of this gap between that and, you know, the $1.2 million starter home in New Canaan. So I take your point. But if you look at, like, what does a 1-bedroom in town go for? It's almost, was it close to $3,000 a month or so, maybe for a walk up more. So it's not cheap. So there's that too. But thank you.
I spoke to a neighbor of mine today who lives on Weed Street, who also mentioned the fact that she's concerned about, there's some lovely residential neighborhoods with old homes that are gracious and have been around for a long time. And is there a plan in place to, as we develop and town keeps moving out and expanding, there's a concern that development is going to encroach on these areas?
Well, that tends to be dealt with through zoning rules such as minimum acreage per unit, which we have, and also a function of water and sewer, especially for particularly intense developments. And then also, if you move parts of town, you have wetland issues and rivers and all kinds of other things that create challenges, frankly. It varies depending on exactly where you are.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all your hard work that you've done on planning and zoning, and I look forward to having us develop affordable workforce housing and getting people great places to live that fit their budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom would like to speak? Go back to Zoom.
No one has their hand raised.
One is that right?
Mr.
Okay.
Stone will speak.
Anyone, please sit right here and please state your name.
Paul Stone from Carp Associates.
That mic doesn't work. It's only this
one
mic or this mic.
You're
So
just gonna have to
stand there,
project
just
it.
speak up. Just speak up, please.
So Paul Stone from Carp Associates. I want to go back to what Commissioner Chris had said earlier, public-private partnership. I think we could all benefit from those kinds of things with all different types of housing, from small to not so small. But one of the things that it could benefit, I could kind of go back to what you got, the commission did a couple of years ago, which is create a new zone with 15% rule in the bonus units and whatnot. Has the commission considered expanding that zone and where that would apply? Because the way I understand it, that zone is in a very sort of confined, condensed area. And I think the whole community could benefit from perhaps considering expanding that a little bit to create a little bit more diverse housing. It could be mixed use, it could be multifamily. And it doesn't have to be, it would basically take the same regs and just maybe expand that slightly with maybe some modifications. That was one thing. Another potential to consider might be the B residence with a 2-family, both attached and detached. Right now, there are a whole lot of lots that are less than the 100-foot frontage needed, and also there's the 100-foot circle that's required for that to create 2-family. I think within the existing, those units or those lots, of which there are a lot in the B-res, could possibly benefit from converting that to a 2-family, either building new or converting existing with no change in height, massing, setbacks, what have you. I don't know, it's something to consider. It's been that reg, I don't know, it's been probably 20, 30 years that's been there, but there could be the creation of a lot more diverse housing, particularly sort of this missing middle, not necessarily an affordable component, but that can be addressed with other types of housing. But that one change alone could benefit a lot of people, say seniors on a fixed income that wouldn't qualify, say, for affordable housing, but could stay at home if they were to downsize. I think this one woman back there earlier mentioned that very thing at the earlier part of this Q&A session. That could be, and this is a perfect example. I think there are other people in that boat that could really benefit with no change to the streetscape at all. So that's something to consider.
I think that's a great recommendation. And just to be clear on what our goals are with the POCD, and in parallel, everyone knows there's an affordable housing committee that the town has put together. Ideally, the product of both of those exercises is going to be some sort of an overlay map of the town that will identify potential areas for that type of denser housing, whether you call it workforce housing, affordable housing, multifamily, or expanding the multifamily or apartment zone, whatever that might be. But that's kind of the big picture goal of our exercise here, as well as the Affordable Housing Committee, to have a better guideline for the town based on everyone's input. The town's input in our analysis and the recommendation of SLR is to have that guideline for the next 10 years. I think recommendations like that and suggestions on, modifying the criteria for those smaller lots would go a long way. We all know the examples in town along Park Street, along Richmond Hill, where we have, I don't want to call them cluster homes, but denser single family homes that work really well on those lots. They're not huge numbers, but they work.
Right, and that could work a lot too with say like teachers, workforce housing, because right now workforce housing is in the POCD. I think it has been for 10 years immediately prior to that, or one previous to that. It's work in town, live in town, right?
Right.
It's become harder and harder to do because there's no inventory to do that. But simple changes like that change that I mentioned, potentially in the B-res, to do that, all of a sudden that opens it way up. Instead of getting one unit on there, one 3,200 square foot, you get two 1,600 square foot, and it's totally workable.
Right.
With the foot area ratio, a foot area ratio limit would be one way to do that.
But it doesn't change the mass, and it's like it's right there. It's the same building. I mean, you could even retrofit an existing building.
I take your point. And, you can do that without impinging too much on neighbors, having setbacks, still having a nice frontage on the street where it's very livable and people have some outside space of their own they can do. you know, these are the kind of ideas we want to hear from the public, which is why we're holding all these meetings. So we can get some input. We're not kidding when we say we want public input. So we're grateful for that. I hear you also on public-private. You know, one of the things, as I mentioned, as far as potential sites and what to do with them is, where do you want to put it? Especially larger developments, which I think there's a sense in town, they want to put it in the downtown area somewhere. Where you have infrastructure, often you have state highways and other types of facilities and can walk places.
Walkability.
Yeah, and so it's land assemblage is a challenge. Especially with little lots where you got to talk to 7 people to try to get something together. I've been involved in this for 40 years and it's tricky. It's slow and you have to inventory the product for a while you're getting things together, and maybe that last piece doesn't fall into place. It's tough. I hear you. And this is one of the things I want to think about, but where to put it and how the town can maybe be involved in putting the ball in the net, so to speak.
Right, and then we're just working again, public and private working together. I think they can come up with some creative ideas. It's not going to happen necessarily in this session or any one of these sessions, but ongoing talks throughout. So
we understand, and this is what we're trying to think about creatively, not just, well, we have a spot, so let's just put it here. Let's sort of do it by default, but where do you want it? And where's the best place? Because I think New Canaan has the wisdom and the money to do things right. And New Canaan likes to do things the right way and do it well. And if you look at the affordable housing we have, I know you've been involved in that. It's lovely stuff. The money we're investing in Waveney, for example, to preserve all that. And, you know, this is how New Canaan wants to live. And I think it's best for all residents, including residents of more modest means. And we want to be sure that they have a really nice place to live, not just physically, but also the ambiance they're living in. That's what we want. That's what I want.
let's work together.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yes, please. You have to come up here. Thank you.
So I got it after I was out of the office.
I sent through a quick presentation, but I can speak to it. My name's Giacomo Londi. Since moving to New Canaan, one thing you haven't talked about actually is childcare. So one of the reasons why we didn't move to New Canaan.
We did at a prior meeting.
Yeah, I didn't bring it up, but one of the reasons we didn't move here actually was the lack of childcare. And it took us a year and a half to get here because we needed to get our kids covered so we could work. But anyway, I also had the chance this summer to walk around town running for the Board of Ed. And I knew the town was actually pretty diverse in its housing stock. And when you actually go door to door, my guess is I hit around 3,000 houses. My votes were 1,000, so you got the conversion ratio there. But the fact is there's a ton of diversity in housing.
Yes.
And it's pretty interesting, actually, when you see that. As a fact, I'm also a neighbor to a project that's been in the news for a while. So I've had the opportunity to learn a lot about housing, the national issues, the sort of local issues, the politics associated with it, which are relevant. So I'm sorry the presentation didn't come through, but let me just sort of read to you what I put together. I would also highlight that we've done a lot of work on infrastructure associated with large scale projects that have been proposed. I think the 830G Reg G is it that has to cover sewer and stuff like that after 2015. So we've done a lot of work on that. I encourage you to be as specific as you can when you actually work on the POCD. I think specificity would help. So I'll just sort of read to what I was going to say, which is, you know, we all want and understand the need for diversity of housing in New Canaan. So we must address these challenges as a community, despite no easy solutions currently existing. Based on the Town of New Canaan Affordable Housing Plan from May 2022, the earliest the Town of New Canaan will be in 830G compliance will be the year 2080. So most of us will not be in this room when we're in compliance with 830G. So when the last speaker talked about public-private partnerships, and we've talked about how we could rezone areas and all this other kind of stuff, if these new developments aren't sort of tied in with legislation, while it may be good, it still has us dealing with the reality of 830G and what that means for a town like New Canaan. My next comment is, it appears like despite previous legal assurances to the Planning and Zoning Commission, significant town investments and impressive work done by many, including delivering Canaan Parish during COVID and Millport just before that, Hartford does not appear disposed to willingly provide an 830G moratorium to New Canaan. That's just sort of my general observation. We've done a lot of good work in a really tough time and a lot of investments. And despite that, we don't seem to be getting much love from the Capitol.
Just to be clear, we're still in appeal on that.
I know, and there's plenty of litigation, so let's just put a broad litigation cap on all this, that we're aware of that, but I think it's important to speak as a resident of town, but.
Yeah, getting love from Hartford is can be a challenge.
You know.
Especially if you have our zip code.
So I was born in Connecticut, spent most of my time outside Connecticut, but I'm quite impressed by the situation here. So anyway, the next issue really gets to economics, because this is what I've learned is really what drives many things associated with this issue. So we should expect more high density proposals in New Canaan, as the potential profit associated with rezoning for developers and financial investors is significant. Basically what you have is let's call it, break it down to a unit level. We have one unit, which is an acre. And you did a nice job, Sarah, talking about the number of units per acre. So basically the new standard here is go from 1 unit per acre to 30. And you could probably go to 35 or 40. So if you just look at like valuation, and anybody who uses Excel, sort of basic valuation for that land associated with being able to put 30 or 40 units on the same area that you had one, that's a huge uptick. So that's really a challenge for New Canaan longer term, and for people who are actually trying to buy and move here or stay here. And if you look at a lot of the discussion on affordable housing, what I call genuine affordable housing, and if you look at communities that have been impacted by lack of housing, a lot of the economic loss is associated with lack of ownership. Because the ownership, you're building equity, you're paying that off over time. It's a generational thing. So solving housing with just rentals isn't actually driving equity, financial equity, into sort of communities that have not had that in the past. So in my view, the key question for New Canaan and you, because you're sort of fronting the POCD, is recognizing, you need to recognize the profit motive for developers and financial investors. Basically, hold on.
And I hear you.
I know, I just need to put this on the record though.
Okay.
It's financial investors are backing these projects and developers do it. That's how this sort of system works. There's plenty of articles on that, And if they're successful at purchasing properties and rezoning them, essentially from 1 to 30 is the math, you have huge upside. So the question then for the town is, recognizing that issue, do we want to comprehensively address these challenges of diversity in housing on behalf of the residents before 2080 with a plan that's committed to following? Or would we prefer the individual residents deal with whatever proposals are made by developers and financial investors who seek to attempt to pick where and when rezoning potentially takes place for their financial benefit? And that's, to me, the fundamental challenge here. Are we going to get deep on the POCD? and really lay out how we want this to go and address this 2080 issue? Or are we gonna take it as it comes? And the commission will have to take it as it comes, and the abutting neighbors will have to take it as it comes. That's
So-
the challenge.
So the intent of, as I said earlier, the intent of this whole effort on the POCD as well as the Affordable Housing Committee is to do exactly that. Is to dictate what we want the town to look like. The problem is with 830G, all bets are off. We could write whatever code we want and it could look as great as we could craft it for the town and for every resident and for every neighbor in terms of, you know, how dense or not dense certain areas will be. But in the end, because of the way the law is written, because of Hartford, any developer can come in and buy any property. And if they claim 830G, they can build anything they want. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that's essentially it.
So there's a couple ways to deal with that. I think many of us have been dealing with it one way. Another way to deal with that, and I think what's happened in the past has happened in the past, but there's sort of a two-prong way to deal with it, I would say. Which is, number one, the town needs to actually get this Affordable Housing Committee in action.
Mhm.
So I would say chop chop on that. The second issue is you're gonna need to find a place to put a development to deal with this. Now, we can either privatize it, which is essentially what it appears like is going on right now, or we could decide as a town that this is how we want to deal with it. Based on my observations for how we've been treated with regards to Canaan Parish and Millport, you're gonna have to have a really solid agreement with the state of Connecticut that they're actually gonna reward us, not just say thank you very much and move on to the next issue.
I totally agree. I mean, there's more than enough appetite in town and eventually funding in town to build 100% affordable units somewhere. I don't know where. I mean, the disadvantage we face as a town is we have limited town land, right? The entirety of New Canaan is developed. So there's only a handful, probably half a dozen properties that could be good candidates for larger development that are town land, but not all of them check every box. So we're not, you know, when Hartford wrote 830G, they're not thinking of us. They're thinking of, you know, Southington, Connecticut or Mansfield, where you've got acres and acres of farmland, then you can drop a 200 unit parcel in there that is on a bus route somewhere and they're satisfied. We can't do that here. So we're trying to explore every option possible as to town, you know, Mr. Chris mentioned it earlier and we've talked about it openly.
Yeah.
You know, town properties, the Locust Avenue parking lot, the Richmond Hill Avenue parking lot. You know, we all know the Lumberyard lot as a prime candidate eventually, I would guess. But there's select properties in town that would come close to satisfying those criteria. And I think our goal is to see what beyond those, what other things we can do to put measures in place to allow that type of development.
I would concur with Commissioner Radman. As I mentioned a few spots, you know, Richmond Hill may not be the place for a big affordable housing, but you could sell it, take the cash and move on and do something else. And also, I would be upset if the decision on where to put something is simply because we already own the parking lot. I mean, that's just not the best idea. Take out a clean sheet of paper. Where should it go? And you may have to write a partial check. You may have to sell surplus assets and move various pieces on the board. Because I think what I've heard any number of times being on this commission is New Canaan wants to put something, the right thing, where it wants it. Not by default because we already own the spot. Maybe that's it, maybe not. And this becomes the issue of land assemblage and I will say potential condemnation to part of things, because I think there's a sense that any kind of larger development, which any kind of fully affordable development would be, would be somewhere in the downtown area, where we already have development and infrastructure and roads and everything else you're going to need, and it's walkable various places. And so it comes down to pick some spots. Some may be partly town-owned, some may be not at all town-owned. Some may be wholly town-owned, but I think those are issues that we need to think about. I mentioned a few other spots. There are any number of properties that are in town that are getting a little tired, I'll say it. You know, I don't want to seem to pick on folks, but if you look at everything from between Burtis and East Avenue up to Cherry, behind downtown, by the Main Street, it's a lot of older buildings. There's a forge there, and there's a laundromat, and a few others older buildings. It's a pretty large property, and it's on a state highway. If you even think about the area behind, that's privately owned behind, as I mentioned, behind Locust, you have two entrances. You have Locust and you also have Heritage Hill, and the fire marshal really likes two entrances, and we don't want to upset the fire marshal. And so for public safety issues, you have that. So there are lots of creative things we can think about, and I think that's what we're trying to do. I'm sure that's what our Affordable Housing Committee will do, and I have every confidence the town leaders, with our first selectman on down, wants to have very good people on that, and they want to move forward. And so these are some of the things we're thinking about from the commission, is that we're in our 10-year plan, where do we want to put things? Because I think we want to put big things where we want to put them, as opposed to they just happen to end up there. I don't think anyone's going to be satisfied with that.
So just.
Wait, I'm sorry, if I may, because Commissioner Turner's been very patient, so I apologize, sir. But Commissioner Turner, floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we understand where properties can be built or built on. Because of the sewer aspect of it, we're limited to a certain geographic area where there are existing sewers, or the possibility of extending one, which we know is very difficult. So we're not talking about an area outside of the current zones that are serviced by sewer. So I just don't want the public to think that somebody's going to buy their property next door to them in a 2-4 acre zone and build a housing complex of the density that is being described. I just want to make that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Just on that point, I actually tried to do a study of the valuation difference between on sewer and off sewer property. So there's actually some interesting studies out there. And I think the state of Massachusetts regulates sort of how much discharge you can have, and then that's related to how big your on-site processing needs to be. So we have 2 large users of the of septic in town, meaning the Country Club and Silver Hill. So yeah, I understand the point about being on sewer and being off sewer, but you can also build large off sewer. It's just a matter of the impact it has on the sort of property and how you use it. So we should be careful that this is just a sewer versus non-sewer discussion. There's shocking amount of interesting information about sewers out there. So it's interesting. A lot of it comes down to engineering. So we need to be holistic here in how we're dealing with this stuff.
Commissioner Turner, you please.
Yeah, thank you. I can speak for what I've witnessed with Silver Hill, for example. They looked at building a sewage plant on their property, and determined that it wasn't financially feasible. There would be quite an objection, I'm sure, from the neighbors. And so they're really maxed out as far as the land that they have to be able to have a septic system that works and satisfies all the governmental requirements. So you would have to have very, very large piece of land to do it by septic, which would not make the development affordable in my mind. Or you would have to put up a plant, a sewer system plant that processes the waste.
Yeah, we got.
It all comes down to money. And it's the question of how much money are you generating
Not necessarily.
to, a lot of cases. And how much money are you generating to pay for it? Because as he talked about, exactly is correct, is as you sort of effluence increases, the processing capacity needs to go up, therefore the cost goes up. But if you're generating enough money to pay for that, you'll do it. And the way the 830G works, as you mentioned, Commissioner, you know, there's essentially an exponential potential for a developer on that. And that's also why I'm talking about the 1:30 or 1:40 or 1:50 ratio. So this really gets out of control very, very quickly. So it's this is a very complicated situation because, and also this term affordable gets thrown around. And that can have many different meanings, but at the end of the day, from a POCD or from a town perspective, we all want affordable so people can live in New Canaan, but from a calculation perspective and what people can do with the property, it's down to a technical definition of what is affordable as it defined in 830G, as we've all learned.
Some of the things on private sewage treatment plants, which I've had to deal with in the past. If you look at the Silver Hill where people live, people do live at Silver Hill Hospital. They have, you know, residents who are, you know, being treated. You don't really have much residents. You do have visitors at the country club, but they have a huge footprint. And Silver Hill is not as big, but still pretty big. I mean, I've seen this in other areas. I think memory serves that there were a number of these in rural areas in Massachusetts, private sewage treatment plants that then got very mismanaged, and then the state has to take them over. I'm not sure that's a great idea or a solution that the town of New Canaan would be happy with, or anyone would be happy with.
I'm just saying these exactly the issues you're talking about, but this is the point, which is, you know, you get these weird regulations and then people find workarounds and all this kind of stuff, and that's so. It's complicated and there's not just one final answer because, you know, engineering and innovation can take you far
Well,
combined with regulation.
I think there's a general sense that I've heard from people is that any more intense development should be in the downtown-ish area where there is significant infrastructure.
And I think
Probably exacerbate our already challenging parking problem. Which is a real thing. And when we get to downtown, we haven't forgotten downtown. We are going to talk about parking, I'm sure, but traffic and parking. I mean, look at Elm Street, man. It's tough getting through that, especially during delivery time. Ouch, that is not easy.
I think we should also define what is downtown, because when I sort of completed the survey question, I believe downtown was a larger definition than I sort of expected it to be. So when we're talking about downtown, what are we talking about as the exact contours of downtown?
When I think of downtown as anything that's in a business district, so you have Cross and Biddy, which have businesses. You have Main down to essentially the library. And across from the library on Main Street are some very low-rise buildings that don't tend to do all that well, frankly. You have that area, you have a big branch bank. We'll see how long Wells wants to stay there, frankly. And next to it is another building, which has been empty for quite a while, that white building on Cherry. But anything where there is a business of some sort is, at least in my mind, and what I think most people, is what downtown means.
I agree. The challenge is, as we've all found out, this is all about what's written. And I think we should agree on what the legal contours are of downtown that we're referring to if we talk about downtown as an entity in the next POC.
So we won't be able to obviously legally say from Bank Street and north, that is downtown and that's it. But you know that we have noted it, and we may very well be able to include a map that shows a polygon that clearly says this is what we define as the downtown and where we would like to see more dense development. That will likely be a part of the plan. But again, it probably won't be this from this day forth in 2024.
No, but we define zoning areas, we define the overlay, the inclusion zone, we've defined that, you know, so what's downtown?
Definitely, and we will. And again, as Dan or Commissioner Radman had alluded to before, we like to be as specific as possible in these plans, but again, no plan is perfect, and unfortunately, holes can get punched into it, whether we would like it to or not.
Thank you all.
Yes, First Selectman, please. Thank you.
all for Doing us. Well, I wanted to start off by saying it is a priority.
You are First Selectman Deanna Carlson. Gotta say that for the record. Thank you.
I just want to say, as I've said throughout, it is a priority of mine to constitute the Affordable Housing Commission. But what I really wanted to address, and doing that sooner rather than later, but I have only been in office for 3 weeks, so a few things going on. But I wanted to sort of address the workforce housing issue that has come up multiple times. I think it's the best of New Canaanites to want to provide housing for our police, fire, teachers, all those people who are sort of struggling to find housing in this town if they want to live and work here. Unfortunately, the state of Connecticut has made workforce housing, in my view, something that we cannot address until 830G is modified. Every unit of affordable workforce housing, because I think we need to be very clear, affordable and workforce housing are not the same thing. And I think we need to be very clear. Affordable housing, in the campaign, I believe I looked at it, for a family of 4, you have to earn $80,000 or less. That is not a teacher, that is not a fireman, that is not our, there are very few people that work in this community. Maybe some of our downtown workers maybe qualify for that, but there are very few of the people that we're looking to help that would qualify for affordable housing. And so, and every densification that you look at that is not truly affordable under the state's definition creates a system where we have to build more affordable. And we put ourselves, we already are having densification issues in this town. I mean, I've lived in this town 27 years. The traffic that I have experienced from the time I moved here to now is exponential. And so I think people need to understand, we all want to do what's good for our neighbors and to be a welcoming community, but we don't have the infrastructure here set up to handle massive densification. And I can tell you, the Park Street development, I had people coming into my campaign office during, the summer saying, that is nowhere near affordable. That is expensive housing. That is not for our teachers. That's not for our fire. Some retirees have moved there because they can afford it, or Wall Street people, young Wall Street people can afford it. It is not for, lower income individuals. So I think as a board, you need to really think carefully about this subdivision for quote unquote workforce housing, because all it does is densify our downtown, and we don't have the infrastructure currently. And most people move to New Canaan to get out of New York City. That is not, we don't have people moving from less, en masse. We are not seeing people move from the countryside to move to New Canaan. They are moving to get out of dense environments. So I don't know that it is a desire of this community to have mass density anywhere. I mean, obviously downtown is already more dense, but all this subdividing that you're talking about downtown that doesn't satisfy 830G, to me, is problematic for this community. We have over 17% multifamily in this community. If you compare us to other like communities, we are much better off in multifamily. We're doing a good job. We're not doing a good job selling ourselves to the state, but we are doing a good job providing multifamily housing. So I don't think that you as a planning and zoning board need to create a ton of more multifamily for non-affordable housing. And I know developers would like you to do that because they get big rents from those kind of properties, but it doesn't help us. And it creates this never ending cycle of needing more affordable for us. So I really would urge you not to look at, segmenting properties in downtown that are not affordable, truly affordable and truly 100% affordable, not developer affordable. Thank you.
Thank you for selecting, I mean, my own comments on, where to put it. My focus is on something that would be under the housing authority that is fully affordable under the state rules. Where there is going to be densification with that. I don't think there's a way around that for an affordable housing project. But focus on that so that some of the challenges of 830G that has been highlighted by any number of people who have spoken before this commission would be not there anymore, and that we can become, again, masters of our own destiny, which I think is what we want to do in town. But we want to have a properly located affordable housing. We want it lovely and wonderful and well-designed, as I think the Canaan Parish is. It's really a lovely place with open space and places for children to play. And this is exactly what we want, as opposed to just a big building plopped on some land and then it's, walk 3 blocks to the park. I think at least that's what's my own mind. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the our Affordable Housing Commission will think about, as well as the Board of Selectmen and the Town Council. So I welcome that, and we welcome the input here. Is there anyone on Zoom? We haven't asked Zoom anytime recently that would like to speak.
I don't see any hands raised.
No hands raised. Anyone here? Mr. Carp, if you could come up here and speak, please.
Our commissioners. Well, I've heard all the good buzzwords today. We need housing. We don't know where it should go. There's a lack of housing. The 2080, 10% is a goal for 830G. It's not the mandate, it's a goal. No town that hasn't been doing it for the 30 years that it's been out there is going to hit a 10% goal. It's just too many units for too small a piece of property. It was interesting because, you'd sell a piece of property, take the money, and then build affordable housing. Let's talk about housing. To build any unit, be it Canaan Parish, is a $600,000 investment. So if you take that and add land to it, whatever your land cost is, the 30% affordable housing was put in for the people who didn't want affordable housing. It's only supposed to be 10% originally. And the opponents of affordable housing 30 years ago said, well, if we make it 30%, no one will ever be able to afford to build it. As they've seen, economics have changed and the numbers start to make sense. But somebody had said it's all about profit. If you build an affordable unit, and it's $600,000 plus land. So let's use $800,000. Basically, you're investing $800,000 in your community that you'll see a return over 30 or 40 years on, which is no return. There are 2 levels of affordable housing. There's 80% affordable and 60% affordable. In New Canaan, our police and firemen make too much money for affordable housing. Teachers for the first, I think it's 3, maybe 4 years, could qualify. So when you talk about workforce housing, maybe if the POCD really wants to get something done on housing, you should examine Greenwich, who's gone from one of the worst to maybe the most progressive. What they're now doing with their affordable housing applications, their 830G that everybody worries about, and those can only be on sewer for 830G. Is they sit down with the developer, instead of getting 4, 5, and 6-story buildings, they work out a compromise. And in a lot of cases, instead of the project being 30% affordable, it's 28, 26, 20, 10, 12. They pick a number that works for the town and works for the developer. So instead of saying, well, geez, we'll never get to 10%, you probably won't. But housing is an issue. It doesn't matter where it goes, I understand it's a lofty goal to put it downtown, but most of downtown is pretty well developed. John, you have only one piece of property downtown that's currently available for sale. You could buy the remainder of Cross Street. It's for sale. But besides that, there is not a whole lot of commercial properties that are for sale. So, you know, condemnation is difficult. If it cost me $600,000 to build a unit, it costs the town the same $600,000. So the economics don't change. It's just a question of how you get there. Paul had mentioned private partner, you know, private and public partnerships. It's the only way to actually build stuff unless you have somebody who's literally going to go donate 10, 20, $30 million to go build housing. And that's very hard to do. You know, Park Street, which is called The View, wasn't built with an affordable housing component. The developer, which I am part of, offered it for to the town to build some affordable units. The town decided not. The people who live there, let's talk about the demographic. On the rental side, it's people who are coming back to town because usually they have parents or grandparents, something that has caused them to stay in town. So we have a younger demographic. We have a much older demographic who've sold their houses, now want to rent. And on the condo side, we have people who've moved here literally, I'll say countrywide, largely because they either have children or somebody in the area, and I'll range that from New York to Boston. So those were never supposed to be affordable. Yes, we do get a high rent. On the other hand, it's single floor living with concierge on the condo side. On the rental side, they're the nicest apartments, if I say so myself, available in New Canaan. It's a supply and demand thing. We haven't had more than a vacancy for a week because as soon as somebody says they're moving out, sometimes it's a job change, sometimes it's a change of circumstances, we've been able to rent them. But, you know, the whole concept of being afraid of 830G, I'm not sure it should be a defensive mechanism. You know, we bemoan the fact that we took Canaan Parish, which was 60 units, and we rebuilt those 60 units and added 40. I'm not sure that I agree or disagree with the state ruling, but while they're out there, you've only added 40 units of housing, okay? You had 60, you built 100, you really should only get plus 40. I don't actually believe that that is the only way to look at it, but instead of bemoaning the moratorium that we don't have, I think it's time to look at, you know, I've said it before, go look at Greenwich, because they have, I think, 14 830G applications, and they have found a very effective way to lower density. But if you're going to build a project and you come in under 830G and you have to give 30% away, that's essentially what you're doing. You're making a 30 or 40-year commitment, okay, to basically charge somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 a month rent, okay? You're not amortizing your $600,000 bill, and that's only going to go up, or your land at those numbers. So I keep on hearing how profitable it is. No, I actually believe in affordable housing. There's a gentleman who works for me who lived in Norwalk 20 years ago, came to me and said, there are gunshots in my neighborhood. Since that time, he has lived in New Canaan. He has 3 children. He has, I believe, a 7th grade education. His wife has a less than spectacular job, but they now have 2 of their 3 children in college and a 3rd on the way. So again, if you do housing and you do it properly, it can be a game changer. And I keep on hearing generational wealth. We shouldn't just rent to these people, whoever they are, because they should own. That's a lofty goal, but let's be honest, it's a barrier to entry. Let's give people who need housing, decent housing. You know, we started off the conversation by saying how good Canaan Parish was. Canaan Parish went from substandard housing to, I would say, state of the art, with a lot of help from some of the people who are sitting in this room. who said it was time to update it. Worked with the state. State gave us money. We found other ways to bond it, but that's a successful project. Doesn't mean that should be the only project that New Canaan looks at. So I would tell you that if you're looking at a real document for the next 10 years, we should study what Greenwich and other communities are doing. You know, Wilton was for the first time ever changed their view from on 830G and affordable housing. They've now, you know, changed their zoning in such a way that they're allowing it and they're negotiating it out. There seems to be a way to be able to get people to live and work in the community that they live in. So, saying that every single unit doesn't work, yeah, people who don't have housing would tell you that every single unit is a step in the right direction. And there's also great that if you build a unit, you fall behind on the affordable housing. It's not a 1-for-1. It's a numerator and denominator. So is it 10 to 1, Paul?
Yeah.
10 to 1.
Yeah.
So you have to build 10 units before you have an issue. So,
We built 100 and we need now 10 more units.
and I offered the town 10 units when I built it. You know, Deanna, it's interesting. You know, I heard your comments and I'll approach since you know, nobody really wants it. You know, traffic, every town has traffic. Okay, people are driving less, except I guess in New Canaan. You know, New Canaan is what New Canaan is. And they'll either work with the confines of the state law, or you will say, well, there's no way to work with it. And my view is, take it for what it is, work in a way that is progressive. I'm not saying everything has to be 100 units, but where's the town going to get $50 million to build the next affordable housing? Don't have land. Okay, so unless you're going to work with the devils, which are people who actually believe in affordable housing, you'll always be negligent on what you can or are willing to do. But you know, it's interesting that you said that Park Street was expensive. We offered it. P&Z then, I don't think anybody was on the commission at that point, said they didn't want the 10 units we were offering. You know, I didn't think I needed to make another gift to the town. Just gift. If you'd like
Workforce.
to put up if you'd like to put up $600,000, I'm happy to build as many affordable units as you'd like.
So we can hash this out.
Yes.
Offline,
Yeah.
obviously, so we could,
Well,
do
you
you
know,
have any other comments, Arnold?
Nope, that's it.
you have to state your name. I don't think you stated your name.
Arnold Carp, 16 Cross Street.
I have just a clarifying question, what you're speaking of in Greenwich, about them negotiating the 830G applications. Is this after they've gone through the process and they're in court, or is this before?
No,
Like,
Before.
somebody,
It's before Greenwich has established an affordable housing committee similar to what we've been doing.
Mhm.
And that committee is specifically charged with negotiating with developers before the application comes to P&Z.
Okay. Because all I was gonna say is when once an application is submitted, I don't believe you can negotiate during that time.
Right, it's
So
a
it has to
it's
be
a
before.
pre-negotiation.
Or after, when it's in
Well,
court.
no, I believe that, Dan, I may be incorrect, but I believe they talk while they're in P&Z.
You can,
I
you can
spoke to-
negotiate within an open application as long as
Yeah.
everything gets submitted in time,
Yeah,
you know,
they might.
it's a challenge, but.
But I've spoken to the commissioner in Greenwich, and she's clear that it's a separate body that's been charged with pre-application negotiations with the
Okay.
builders, and additional negotiation might happen subsequent to that, even during the submission.
Okay.
But the goal is to negotiate early on to find a happy medium that would then
Before
streamline
somebody-
the process and make everyone happy.
Yeah, they've reduced the mass of the buildings, which is
Mhm.
the issue. On the other hand, they are moving forward on creating, you know, what I will say is under market priced units. They've also added, I think, a workforce for the town.
Yes.
So if you're a town employee, you do get a preference in that housing. But, you know, I do have a list of 30 people who would take affordable housing if it was offered.
I don't necessarily, well, when I hear about local people, they always mention essentially unionized civil servants as opposed to the person running the grocery store and so forth. And I want to think about them too. They work in town. It's not just the civil servants. If I think of different towns in Wilton, you know, you have Route 7, which is federal highway and very busy. And it's a different kind of road with lots of different possibilities for development. If you look at Greenwich, you also have Route 1, another federal highway going through it. You have that in Darien too, where you have some larger ones on that. You know, we're careful about preserving historical structures in town. We try to be, and we're. I don't know what that is.
Sorry.
Gonna put your phaser on stun. That's what I was doing.
Let's.
But just because the town does not own a property, though the condemnation is sort of a thing that could be complex. You know, I think with the right will and certainly the means, these developments can be put together with land assemblage. It can be challenging, right? That. And I hear in $600,000 a unit because rebar costs what rebar costs and gypsum wall costs what gypsum costs and all the rest. And if it's affordable, you have different labor costs than if it's not affordable. And so these are all things to think about. But the town has done it. I'm sure the town can do it. And there are any number of places in the kind of downtown-ish area where there is space, I think, and that could be spots where 100% affordable, nice affordable could go. And I think that's something that we want to think about, because again, there's a strong desire on the part of this town to be master of their own destiny. And I think that's something that most all people in town would be supportive of. They just want to hear what the story is and what's it going to be and where's it going to go and what does it look like and all the rest. And so I look forward to some of those details being presented. So thank you.
I welcome the town, you know, you have 2 or 3 people who are sitting in the audience who were, you know, instrumental in getting Canaan Parish built. I'm sure they, you know, if asked, would build another project. Town needs land and the resources. I mean, I think it took 5 years to get Canaan Parish, I'll say, out of the ground. So that was, you know, a year of planning, 2 years of architecture. And
2 years of COVID.
COVID was an issue, but they built, you know, through it. It was funding that was the issue. But you know, it takes 5+ years to get a project from concept to completion.
It came through planning and zoning very quickly, so we did our bit to move it.
Yeah, I guess it would surprise you that at one point we were concerned it wouldn't get moved. So again, attitudes change, hopefully, when they see that there's a need. But again, there are lots of techniques that other towns have embraced to get building done that meets the diverse housing.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom wish to speak? You want to, no raised hands? Anyone, Ms. Weingarten, please. You could please sit right there and state your name. You may, yes.
Hi, Maria Weingarten, 115 Lone Tree Farm Road. So I just want to clarify a couple of things that were mentioned. You know, 830G, I guess, is really not a POCD thing per se, but I mean, the reality is 830G hasn't been successful. I mean, if you had 29 exempt 30 years ago and you still only have 29 that have hit that 10% benchmark, you're really not doing a successful program that's working. So it's something that needs to be addressed. That's obviously not something that you can all address, unfortunately. But it's, the reality of 830G is that those that do have the 10%, they've received seed funding from the state, grants, which have made enormous impact on the fact that they were able to develop. So when we go out to try to fund, and Scott could talk about this, we don't get those 9% loans that would cover 70% of the cost of the development. We can get a 4%, sure, but we also don't get the vouchers, which is something that I do think might be worth investigating as a town, is finding a way to get those housing vouchers that are made available to other communities. And they do not come to our town. And those are project-based ones that I'm talking about specifically, but because we don't get any people vouchers either. So I think any opportunity for us to do that would allow us to have some of the more deeply affordable, because for us to make a project work out and the numbers to work, you would need to have something additional like vouchers thrown in on that to have like a more deeply affordable situation where you can have someone. So that's what I'll talk about on that.
When you say vouchers, are you referring to Section 8 or are you referring to something else?
The state gives out vouchers as well, like they're given funding for vouchers. I'm not an expert on vouchers, but as I'm trying to learn as much as I can about it, I think that's one of the things that would be helpful for us. And again, this only helps, really those who need affordable housing in that capital A affordable. Because the reality is workforce, as has been mentioned, is going to be challenging because of our land cost, because, properties that are, further out that are more affordable are, torn down. They're looked at as tear down opportunities for people to purchase and then build a home, a bigger home on them. Regarding Greenwich, my understanding is that they've created a fund, a housing fund, that people can donate to. So it's not just a matter of having someone, in a sale of on a transaction where a certain percentage is going to go into a housing trust fund or anything on any sort of like we have right now, where it's for any sort of renovation project where you're expanding footprint or new construction. So there is an opportunity maybe to explore something like that to see if someone wants to be more granting as a donor to something like that. Because I think what Greenwich is doing is that they're buying down or creating projects that are a higher percentage affordable. So if somebody came in with a 20% or whatever, 30%, they'll buy into it to have a higher percentage of them be affordable units on a project. Or whether that's, buy down the number of units that makes the numbers work better. But again, it's important for us. So that's another thing that we can consider to look at is the idea of having this fund and an ability to negotiate and be able to buy down some of the market value units on projects. So the mention of mixed use, I think, is really important. I think for our downtown, anytime where we have those opportunities to make sure that there is a mixed use component to make it more walkable around in our transit oriented development areas would be important to try to have that. New Canaan does have 17.3% multifamily, which is high relative to all of our DIRG towns. So which range around 8% to some and 14, 15% in others. I mean, those numbers are a little bit stale right now because I know we have some units that came on and Darien just had some more units. So those are going to fluctuate, but we have done very well. We have a really good mix of multifamily already. It's just a matter of, for us, I think we just want to try to get to have more affordable. And the way we can do that would best serve us is, as we have had a strategy in the past, is to provide 100% affordable developments. And mainly because that allows us to have them stay forever affordable, because that's what's really not being addressed here, is that it's someone's doing us a favor for 30 years, 40 years, or 40 years right now is the way 830G is, right? So for 40 years, it's affordable, and then it goes away.
Well, provided the state gives us the credits for the units we build.
Yeah.
Right. There's that too. Yeah. So I'm going to leave that on the side. Westcott had mentioned Francis Pickering had mentioned something interesting to me from Westcott. He was looking into it and I didn't get any information from him on New Canaan, but he mentioned that there's some non-conforming. So if you have, 2-acre zoning and maybe someone's got 2.5 acres or something else like that. And sometimes that's because of wetlands or something and there may not be as much usable in it. But if there's an opportunity to potentially have a scenario where somebody might be able to sell that non-conforming piece and maybe limit the size of what can be built there. So if it's a much smaller space, maybe it's like a 1 or 2 bedroom, make it more of a ranch, so if you can limit, if there's a way to limit something like that, it was an interesting thought to me, to find a way to maybe to be able to build smaller in an area that generally is not. And I know septic is an issue because you usually have to provide for a 3-bedroom in a septic. Is that
Yeah, most of our 2-acre and above are on septic, so.
right? So
All of it.
All of it is, yeah.
So, that's the only issue is how much can you, how small a septic can you get in there? And, but if there's a way to deed restrict it to make it limited in size and, just to, I don't know, but it was something that was mentioned and it's interesting. And I just wonder if you all have reached out to Westcott because I know they've been doing some research now on alternatives for affordable housing and what different communities can be doing to try to meet their numbers, the elusive 10%. Regarding traffic. So off-street parking, one size doesn't fit all. Let me start with that. When I'm part of CT 169 Strong, so we look to find affordable housing solutions that are going to work. And I think the most frustrating aspect of a lot of what we've seen from coming down from the state is one size policies. And when I think about all the communities that we visited and even towns like Fairfield or any of these other towns, they've all developed in different ways. We're all historic communities that have, go back to the founding of our country. And so we in particular in New Canaan have very narrow roads or the roads that we do have are very congested, have a lot of traffic on them. So the idea that we have to have enough adequate off-street parking to be able to handle the needs of the residents in any of these developments. And I applaud you guys for not going on to the limits that were originally outlined by the state. But I think that's going to be very important going forward. And part of the reality of that is that our schools, the reality is people need a car here. They just do. And so if you have to go get your kid from school because they're sick or whatever, how are you going to, you can't just rely on the bus dropping them on it, because the schools are not nearby. So, it's very important that we think about these things and make sure that people have cars and have access to parking when they need it. And I think about some of the streets that we have in town area that are half-acre or even tighter. And you can't really, if you don't have that off-street parking requirement, it's going to be very challenging for even, having 2 cars pass each other on these lanes if you had parking on the street only. So I think that's a really important thing to keep thinking about is one size doesn't fit all. And we have to focus on what our needs are here. I think that's about it. That's all I have. Lots of different topics, but I've been hearing, so I just started taking some notes, so.
Thank you. I was just thinking of some math. Let's say it's $600,000 a unit. Now, what does a unit mean? Let's call it 2-bedroom. So let's throw in some land cost. You're what, at least 100,000 a unit? If you figured 10 on an acre, so another 700. So if you're having $3,000 a month in rent, that's 36,000 a year. So that's about 5% on cost. That's before you figure expenses of someone to manage the unit and so forth. That's a pretty low cap rate for an apartment, which means you have to have more money. So it's the cost of building a unit is such that you need a subsidy somewhere if you're going to have someone who is subsidized and paying less than market rent. I remember before this commission, when we had someone apply for a special permit to put 2 1-bedrooms in the Main Street area in an old office on the upper floor. It was under 750 square foot limit we had. It was 1 bedroom, a walk up with no parking. And I asked him, well, what kind of rent do you get on this? This is a couple of years ago. He said, oh, but I think it was 2,900 sort of the average. So that it's no parking and a walk up. So things are expensive just because the cost of a build is expensive. And it needs a subsidy. I mean, my own focus is that the first thing is to focus on truly affordable housing controlled by the town that is going to address the mandates the state wants us to make. That is my own priority that we should focus on. The other areas are important, and I don't want to diminish them. But again, you know, what's head of the line? My own view is that should be the head of the line, is to deal with that. As far as affordable housing, there are many other housing issues we have to think about. I thought Mr. Stone's comments about rethinking some of the density on various multifamily areas, that was a very good idea, and I'd like to explore that, as I think Commissioner Radman mentioned, where you can have, you know, greater housing variety still is something that, you know, fits with the street and is not going to impinge on neighbors. You know, I'm happy to explore that. I think it's a great idea, so I thank him for that. But anyway, so thank you, Ms. Weingart.
Yeah, I mean, A30G is very vexing. And I think when you look at Massachusetts, their version of it is much better in the sense that they don't allow you to override setback and height. So it has to be in keeping with the area. And I think that that's what we generally aim for in our town, right? So, I mean, it's unfortunate that ours is a very different animal than what they have in Massachusetts. And there's a lot less litigation there too.
Well, higher density development, I mean, it was a number of years back now, it was the one, the old Maples Inn. That's, people may know where it is. It's on Oak, a little bit south of the Roger Sherman. And it looks like just a big house, and there's a coach house in the back, but it's all condo. And it looks gorgeous, in my opinion. And I think I don't know how many units, 12 units or something there, something like that.
I don't even know if it's that many.
But it's 10, 12, yeah, and it's beautiful and it's spacious and it really is lovely development, I think. You know, something like that, you know, my initial reaction would be, that sounds very nice, you know, tell me more.
Another thing Francis Pickering had mentioned was that, you know, in a lot of these communities where you had a large Victorian or something like that, and the idea that you could divide it up instead of tearing it down or whatever, just finding ways to create that into a multifamily so that you maintain your, you know, what you have in terms of the charm of the community, and you still have the ability to provide more housing.
Okay.
At a lower cost.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weingart. Mr. Hobbs, please. You could sit here and please state your name for the record.
So Scott Hobbs, 48 West Road, New Canaan. Thank you guys for doing all this work. It's needed and appreciated, and just have a couple of thoughts or suggestions. And always apologize for not sitting in on the last 37 meetings and just showing up and thinking you hadn't thought of something. But one of the, for some of the stuff that's been mentioned, I'm probably just going to rephrase a little bit differently. In trying to write anything on affordable housing, if we were to poll everyone here and say, give me a legal definition of affordable housing, you'd probably end up with 35 different definitions. And so anything that you're trying to, whatever we put in the POCD, try to be very specific in what you're talking about. Because affordable housing can mean seniors, you know, is it 60, 40, 80, is it 95, is it workforce, is it plus 110 or 20? And so just clarifying inside the document.
I asked for that in the intro. We want specifics. We agree. I agree anyway.
And just people will use it against us, and that'll be one of the issues that comes up. And so I'm trying to not have that happen.
Fair point.
Parking's been addressed inside of here, and I want to be an overall general proponent for parking in general in New Canaan. So everyone talks about we don't need the, we don't need certain parking lots because we don't use them anymore. They're outdated. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that if every parking space we lose in New Canaan, we will never, ever, ever, ever get back again.
Right.
And so things will change over time, and we may very well need those. And if we have more density and more people are going to be driving into town, and we're going to have more folks around, I'd be very careful about authorizing any of that to go out.
Okay.
I'll also go back under high density projects at Millport. We made a cardinal sin and we made the parking restrict. We had too few parking spaces for our tenants. And people, and that basically puts the burden on our tenants and on the neighbors and on the town and on everyone else in order to figure out what do you do with the cars. And all of our leases are set where, I mean, all the leases are absolutely set. Everyone, knows exactly what's expected, but there's more cars. And you can't exist in a suburban Connecticut town without a car. It just doesn't work. So watch whatever your parking restrictions are, and as you trade off on density, and especially like anything in town, again, relating these, that the no parking space studio or walk up, that guy's got a car somewhere. Where does it go? And again, where does he put it? And eventually you run out of those surplus spaces. There's a huge pull toward luxury, and you mentioned the Maples Inn. And we've seen this a couple of times where I think the Maples Inn did start as like 13 or 14. And then people came in and said, hey, I really like this. I'm taking 3, combine them.
Mhm.
And so somewhere inside of, and I haven't worked the math under this and making it happen, and ultimately economics and the market will decide what's right. But I think the only way to keep control under some pricing inside of a legal framework and doing for the future is limiting the size of the units. So if you can limit the size that no one can ever, if you grant more density and nobody can ever combine units, then the units can't get up to a $2 or $3 or $4 or $5 million thing, price, because at 750 square feet, they're not going to get up there. It's going to automatically remain down at a different point. That being said, if no one wants to buy 750 square foot units, you just created more housing that doesn't actually, that's not needed by anybody. So I just throw that part out. And then ultimately also I'd suggest that allowing some flexibility, that right now 830G is a driving force inside of how you have to address zoning and all those issues. Hartford's contemplating a lot worse things. They got lots worse that are up there that'll just make 830G look like a joke.
Mhm.
So allowing inside the POCD that if the emphasis is going to be toward solving 830G issues, how can 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now the POCD modify and change due to what's going on in Hartford? I don't know if that's allowed or not, but there are bigger threats out there. And then just the final part under all this is if you can get any sort of help under the economics of the situations, and you've had some of it here today. Ultimately, real estate's a math game, and you guys have gone through this, we've talked about this, but if the numbers don't work, whatever we put in the POCD won't happen. So whatever sort of development on dollars or developers you can get, actual real input on, economists, bankers, whoever else it is, provide that real input, will hopefully mean that, again, the hard work you guys have done, will actually be able to be implemented.
I hear you, sir. Thank you. I mean, unless it's economic means there's a subsidy from somebody. It boils down to that, and there's only so much subsidy money to go around. So
correct. I've done some of the math stuff. Affordable housing is incredibly expensive. It's really, really expensive. So, and again, it's only affordable with somebody else making it affordable. That money has to come from somewhere. But I'm talking about even under anything, if you're however, whatever you're deciding on for pushing that we want this, we want that, we want to have something else happen, we want to control. If you can run some scenarios from like a developer's perspective that, look, we want to have 2-story buildings, or we want to have 3-story buildings or whatever. Take a couple examples, put it down on a notional plot of land, work out some of the numbers, and it's like, well, no developer will ever do this. It's great that we want it, but we've now designed, a set of rules that don't work inside of the economics. So that's just what I'm asking for some input from the developers as to what's being proposed. Will it actually work mathematically? And if it does, more likely to happen. If it doesn't, well, it might look good on paper, but it's never going to actually be used.
thank you.
Sorry, one last point. One of the best things that's been mentioned also under Canaan Parish, the more density you have, the more you're able to, the more that it can be asked to have some green space actually on the property. Because again, at like Millport, we have a little bit of green space around, but not enough for kids to play. And that really bothers us because if kids don't have a good place to go outside and do something, whereas in Canaan Parish, we got higher. And with that higher, we were allowed more green space. I think that's just a great trade-off wherever possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone on Zoom like to speak?
And
Ken
what's
likes
the
Oh,
speak?
Kent would like to speak. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Turner, please.
I want to say that, Mr. Hobbs, you've done such an incredible job in helping our community and your sensitivities, your understanding about development and balancing what people need and what's real. I just want to, high five and thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you.
You're here.
Agreed.
Hoping for more. Well, that's again, anyone else on Zoom? Still hoping. Okay, no one. Anyone else in here? Sir, please come up and we will get to downtown, please. We will do that. Please state your name for the
Leo
record.
Carl, 902 Silvermine Road. And my comments may clips both, so I'm gonna get us jump started on the next one. But
Please.
Housing is definitely very important. It's been talked about. Scott just made some good points, and the one theme that's come up is parking, and housing and parking sort of go hand in hand. And as I look at trying to think about our POCD for the next 10 years, and I look back at the last 10 years and see things that have happened, a lot of good things have happened in our downtown area, and a lot of the housing developments have happened in close proximity to downtown. Which means people are wanting to live close to where amenities are, restaurants, grocery shopping. And I think that, and the walkability of the town has done with sidewalk improvements has really helped spur that. I think as we look forward, one issue that's come up for probably as long as I've lived in New Canaan, which is a long time, is parking. And I know that there's people that'll say we don't need as much parking today. You look at the commuter lot, the lumberyard, it's not as densely used as it has been in the past post-pandemic. But I firmly believe that's going to come back. And I think there's a way for the town to potentially help solve some of the housing issues with land that it owns, which is the open parking areas in downtown, and think about air rights partnering with developers in public-private partnership, much like has been done with Waveney Conservancy, the New Canaan Athletic Foundation, where the town has an asset on the ground parking. And as there's been talk of doing parking garages multiple times in the history of New Canaan, nothing's ever happened. Most recently was the Locust Avenue lot. But we built a brand new library that's seeing tremendous traffic, beautiful building, but we actually lost net parking because the parking that was on that block is no longer there. So that's they're utilizing the center school lot, of the old center school lot. And that parking lot on many times that I've even gone over there myself is full. So there's vacant parking in other parts of town, but people want to park close to where they're going.
I was told it's 1,700 people a day.
Yeah,
is the
1,700,
footfall.
1,900. It's amazing the traffic that's going through there. It's a wonderful asset to town, but that's only going to drive more traffic to our downtown. I think over time, because a lot of people haven't even discovered it yet. That will in the next decade. So if we think about parking and getting parking in the right places, and you also think about housing, there are definitely ways thoughtfully in a POCD that we could start thinking about planning ahead and creating some housing on top of parking. And yes, it'll change the complexion of downtown a little bit, but I've seen some amazing developments that don't look like parking structures. And they're not ominous structures, but it's creative, and our topography lends itself to development like that. There's a lot of space in town, or close to downtown, that slopes off in the back, or that it really does lend itself if we thoughtfully think about it. And so I would just encourage between P and Z and other town departments to start thinking about, are there ways that the town could take assets that it has, and not lose any of it? It's the challenge is getting from here to there, because developing anything on a parking lot means you're gonna lose that parking for a period of time during construction. So if you think about the biggest lot, which would be the commuter lot at the lumberyard, what do you do with the cars that are there during a 18 or 24-month period of development time? That's a puzzle that has to get figured out. But it starts to give the town more flexibility in where housing could be done. And I view housing as different buckets, but I mean, 830G is talked about a lot. I'm currently the board chair at Waveney Life Care, and we believe for 30 or 40 years, there's been a need for senior housing in town, housing that's senior friendly. We lose a tremendous number of really engaged New Canaan citizens as they age gracefully in place, and they get to a point where they no longer want to be in their large, single family home on 2 or 4 acres. And they want to be part of a community of like-minded seniors and have some shared activities and shared common space. And we don't have anything like that. And so they leave our town and go south. And once they leave, we lose their volunteerism, their philanthropy, their tax dollars, and they typically don't continue to participate in town. We watch generations of really great New Canaan citizens leave. We're fortunate to have some stay, but the majority of them leave. And if we think about creating maybe a zone, maybe a section of town that's designated for senior friendly housing and allow a little greater density, that could help keep a lot of really great New Canaan citizens intact in town. And so I throw out those ideas to try to get us thinking about maybe some different ways to look at the overall downtown planning and sort of combined traffic flow, parking and housing all together. I think there's some creative solutions that could be surfaced in the next decades.
Thank you. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak? Anyone on Zoom? Anyone else on housing? Because I do want to get to the downtown, which is the business district, and talk about our merchants. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to shift the topic to our downtown. And for purposes of this, it's the business district where offices and retail shops are located in New Canaan, which is quite a large area, but it's focusing on that. So would anyone like to speak on the downtown area? Sir, please come up here and state your name for the record. Take a brownie.
I'm tempted.
No, go ahead. Tempt yourself. Go ahead. Feel better.
Good evening. Some of you may know me. I'm Charles Robinson. And tonight I'm going to speak one voice for two entities, myself and on behalf of the New Canaan Preservation Alliance, Inc., a 501c3 organization that was founded in 2007 to advocate for the preservation of the town's character-defining historic, architectural, and natural environments. We believe that the town of New Canaan's downtown business district is a special place that is highly regarded both within and outside of New Canaan and unique within Fairfield County. We believe it's a functioning business, working, and community center located outside the Boston Post Road corridor. We recognize that this downtown district is often mentioned as a destination attraction for visitors. Most buildings in this district have historic significance and have been well researched and documented, and that maintaining the existing attributes and significance of the district is important to support our local businesses, not only within this district, but also in New Canaan generally. We favor establishment of a downtown historic district encompassing the Main and Elm Streets Business District. We deem it important that going forward, P and Z and town leadership generally should actively support and maintain the benefits of such designated historic district. And NCPA's 2024 POCD revision recommendations, which were provided to P and Z a month ago. And so what I've done, Sarah, is just excerpt from that letter of, I believe it was the 13th or 14th of November, from our president, Neely Stichnoff.
Okay.
And in the interest of brevity, I'll limit myself to those comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good comments on,
Actually, can I ask one
Please.
question?
Please.
You, sir, before you leave? I know you just spoke about downtown Main and Elm. Are there any other parts of town that you guys see historic value in that are
Well,
currently?
you may or may
historic
not
district?
know that NCPA, together with the town and its support, are the entity that achieved the National Historic Register listing of the entirety of Wavening, not just the grounds, not just the building, but including the interiors. We have underway, in the same public-private partnership, if you will, the establishment of the Church Hill National Historic District, which should be viewed as an overlay that includes the town's historic district. And so that's underway, and we're optimistic the state is behind that.
What are your thoughts? This is just my own personal musings right now, but as you go down Main Street past the library, there are a number of Victorian homes there across from the Masonic Temple that is the dance academy. And what I've worried about for years is that those are zoned apartment. So
Sorry, they're
zoned for apartment, they're in our apartment zoning. So someone could assemble the land and construct something bigger and we would lose those Victorian style homes there. You know, I don't know if they reach anyone's radar as being historically significant, but I'm just curious, you know, if you guys have looked at that.
I have no personal opinion on that, nor does NCPA have official position on that at this time.
Okay.
But I would point out to you that the library property itself, at least the northern portion of it, was at least zoned for apartment as well. It's very interesting that we observed that they completely flattened the site, fully half of their properties. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner has his hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm a very graphic person. Didn't quite understand what you said about extending the district. Can you please clarify that a little more so I can understand?
Yes, thank you. What we're advocating is that we go on together, NCPA, together with the support of the town, to create a national historic district that is the downtown business district. And for us to kind of put a pin in it, we call that the Main and Elm District. Are we open? Of course, we're open to extensions to that. But remember, it needs to tell a story. It has to answer so why is this important to the nation, to our state, to others around? Why? And so if it's cogent, as it is the case, for example, with Wavening, and especially with the Churchill Historic District and the kind of range of development that shows, then there's a good discussion we have.
So I think to clarify, you're talking to extend it past where it currently ends with the Red Cross building, go down to Main Street, cover Elm Street to at least the Park Street.
We'd be
Street
talking about a
intersection.
new national historic district.
Correct, but those are kind of the boundaries that you're thinking of? Okay.
So, and as you may know, the Church Hill National Historic District proposed ends literally at this building.
Yeah.
So everything kind of north of it and going westward,
Towards Park.
Seminary and whatever the next one is,
Okay.
there. period. So we're talking about a new
Yeah.
national historic district.
So my question is, by extending this, do you impact owners and tenants of buildings that would fall within this area? And does that mean that they could not change their appearance or renovate or have restrictions on their property? Just a question.
Ken, that's a great question, but let me say this. The answer is actually no, with a less than 1% exception. No is that it's an honorific, in a sense, academic designation to achieve National Historic Listing. In the state of Connecticut, however, and this is the less than 1% aspect, if an entity, a person, a legal entity, can get the support of the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut and can convince that Attorney General to bring an action against someone within the National Historic District that wants to do something that would destroy the whole district, for example, not just change one little thing, but obviate the district or take away its original reasons for being, then that could be the case. But it's so rare that in the history of our state, I think that there have been 3 total actions brought, of which 2 were settled and 1 was adjudicated. And the only one I recall is one of the settled ones in New London, Connecticut.
And to establish this new historic district, would the buy-in of all of the property owners in that district be required?
It would be a simple majority.
A simple majority.
Simple majority.
I think that's where you were going with it, right, Kent?
Yes, just want to make sure that people are being treated fair and that there is a process that if we decide to vote on this, that we're informed and we make our vote for the right reason.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen some of the building, I mean, we had it wasn't an application, it was sort of a pre-application. I can't remember the name of the building. It's on Main, a little north of Elm. It's the one with the sort of white plastic front with the wooden slats.
Yeah, it's on the east side of.
Yeah, it's on the east side, and the gentleman was thinking of renovating it substantially and completely reskinning it. I have to think that the current frontage is sort of 60s something or other. I'm not quite sure what, and many of the windows would sort of end up disappearing when it got reskinned. And he wanted to do it. I mean, I remember the building on across from Morse Court on Main that got renovated maybe 20 years ago by I think it's a private equity. The brick building, I think did a real nice job myself. Yeah, not the telephone building, it's north of that. It's north of where the telephone switching building is.
It's the old telephone building. It is almost directly across from where the modern lower entrance to the old library building was.
No, I'm talking about the building where, was it Spiga? The restaurant is, that building where that got renovated.
So that'd be north, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it did a very nice job renovating it. It's very more attractive than it was, and so I would be wary of not being able to renovate and freshen up buildings that really need some tender loving
A
care.
National Historic Listing would not prohibit such. Would not, either the renovation or the changing the front. Full stop. That's the National Historic District listing. If the town were to go on and extend its own historic district, which is governed by the Historic District Commission, that is where that type of thing comes in. Local regulation is much more strenuous than national. Think national honorific. It's where it's at. And literally in the last 15 or 20 years, Whereas National had some stronger powers, those have been reduced dramatically. It's on it.
Okay,
One last thing to
so
say.
please.
You should know that within a National Historic District, not every single property is contributing or seen as such. In fact, if one identifies a whole district, and yes, there are different owners and different properties, some are singled out and said, this is non-contributing. But where the mass of the others, for example, again, in the Church Hill Historic District, that shows an amazing range of the development of the architectural development of the town through its history. Starting with the establishment of the Canaan Parish.
Commissioner Turner, your hand raised, please. Floor is yours.
I think that what's being proposed is a very good idea. I just have a few concerns that might require a little more study and understanding, and that is, you know, who is impacted by this as far as the property owner, the tenants, and you know, this kind of gets back to the library and keeping the existing building. You know, I think the intent was that there was so much historic character that needed to be saved. But yet there was a library with a vision that was something that was not in alignment. So I just, and I know this is POCD and we're talking about ideas, but I think that on one hand, this gentleman has some very good ideas about extending the historical district, but it shouldn't be at the expense of not being able to revitalize and to create new buildings, environments that really are in keeping with the times and in the long run probably benefit the town. So I realize that POCD doesn't get into this kind of detail, but on one hand, we agree with what he is saying, but I think we probably need to understand a little more about what the potential impacts are.
Okay, I'm not sure that's a question to me, but I would just offer this last observation. And that would be, look at the example of Newport, Rhode Island, a great portion of which is on the National Historic Register. And it is my opinion that they've done as good a job as any town or city in the country at preserving truly valuable historical architecture and doing significant development. And by the way, I'm not limiting myself only to the colonial architecture, but also the cottages, the gardens. They've done a spectacular job there. I will say, Ken, that it's more their local architectural review boards and their local entities that govern what can be done. There's subzones there that have kept it that way than the national, much more local.
And I'll just end by saying, sir, your efforts, your thinking and everything you've done is wonderful, and keep pushing forward.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Would anyone on Zoom like to speak on the downtown area? Takers? Anyone else? Please sit down and please stick.
Walk by these.
No, please take several, otherwise I have to eat them. Otherwise I have to eat them.
Promised him, the only reason I would come up to make a comment tonight is to bring him back a brownie. Tucker Murphy, Garish Lane, thank you for having me. My comments really relate to, obviously, to the downtown. It seems that's where we are right now in the evening. Just wanted to point something out, which I know you're well aware of, but it seems to be becoming more of a challenge these days, is a lot of the second story spaces, if you will, in the downtown are being converted into small studio apartments. And while that's a creative way to solve some of the issues with some of the vacancies on the second floor, it's also causing a lot of problems with parking. We've talked about parking.
Yeah.
And that's something that I know you all are grappling with. I just wanted to bring it to your attention once again. I had another call from somebody today who was thinking of changing one of the office spaces up there into an apartment, but said, well, where am I supposed to park? Where we park our tenants? So just want to make sure that was something that was very much on the radar and bring back a brownie for Tiger.
I appreciate that. I mean, others this evening have spoken of if you have more intense downtown development. I think it was Mr. Hobbs spoke of, and Mr. Carl spoke of this. You know, where do you put the cars? Because you have to have a car, and that the Millport is sort of underparked was sort of my take on it, on one of those comments, and they got to go somewhere, particularly downtown where there is no real street parking. And where do you put people? I mean, the idea of having more downtown living, people are against. They kind of see that as a nice thing to do. Whether it should be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, maybe it's a different conversation, but it's where you put the cars is an issue. And why I think some type of integrated solution needs to be thought about. It doesn't have to be parking on site. It could be, 3 blocks away, but at least you can put your car somewhere. That's not unusual, but that's certainly that's certainly an issue.
I think a perfect example of that potential development and how it can fail is the application that we heard for the Main Street property, the one you were referring to where the facade was going to be renovated. It's the old, I think it was Philip Johnson's office was in that building, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So they were going, this is a year and a half ago.
It was about a year.
Right?
Yeah.
A very preliminary package that came to us. They weren't fully baked yet. And I forget how many units, I think it was like 16 or 18 units going in there with no parking. So their solution was that, and everyone here is probably familiar with the property, and it's got that little back alley that goes next to the nail salon back there. And there's a couple of spots back there, but that's really it. There's a couple of spots. And their solution was they were going to negotiate with Chase Bank as to the available spots in that rear lot that if anyone's driven by there, Chase uses, and they already lease it to other people. And now with the butcher shop and everyone else there, it's full all day long. There's no way that developer could satisfy our parking demand for the number of units he was proposing. So it's a real issue for the downtown area. And unfortunately, the library took away 50 spots when they did their development. So the Center Street lot is now basically the library parking lot. And everyone that used to park there probably can't find a spot in the morning. So we did ourselves a disservice there as a town, because parking demand will never go away, regardless of what some analyst from MIT who studies urban development comes before you and says the world is changing. It's not changing that way, not in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think one example of a space over on South Avenue, sort of above where the old Mackenzie's was, a little bit more down the street, but she went ahead and developed it made it into an apartment, and then after the fact looked for parking. She was finding none of her potential tenants wanted to rent it. Well, they were very interested in renting it until they found out that there was no parking available. So she is a little bit of bind there, but it seems to be coming up more and more, and it's definitely something that part of the POCD process, I would imagine.
There seems to be an interest that any intense development, including potentially truly affordable, would be sort of in the downtown-ish area. Okay, well, where are you going to put the cars? Does this mean that for an integrated solution, do you have to have more structured parking, perhaps municipal lots that's structured? Now, with structured parking, like a parking lot or deck parking, you lose about 20% of spaces if you go from grade to structured, because you have to drive around and so forth. In which case you would be offering potentially, well, if you want to park, you can park there, and it's, $200 a month or something for a ticket. Is that a solution? Certainly that's a maybe. It's doable, but that means there has to be built parking, and you got to put that somewhere. So where does that go? So you pull on one lever, another lever moves. You have to try to think about this in an integrated way, which is what we're trying to figure out here. So we appreciate the input. But
yeah, and finally, I just want to compliment you all the changes that you made to the regulations a while back about the first floor service, allowing for service businesses to exist with some retail component in the front. I think that helped a great deal for some of the vacancies, allowed for it still to be retail, but provide the services in the back. And we're fully occupied on Elm Street right now, and I think Main Street is filling up too, so that really helps.
I think this is the best we've seen in over a decade, probably, in terms of occupancy, right?
Yeah. It's good.
I gotta say, more broadly, which is on downtown, which is why it was put on the agenda for the plan of conservation development sort of community forum, is that if you think of what's great about New Canaan, well, the schools are great and the parks are great and everything, but the downtown is great. It's really unlike any other community in the area. You have maybe kind of sort of Westport with your sort of block and a half, but it's not really. Yeah, it's an outdoor mall with mostly national stores. You have Greenwich Avenue, which is nice, but it's a whole different vibe. You really don't have it in Darien. It's a nice place, Darien, but you really don't have it. You have I-95 and the train cut through it, and plus Route 1. Maybe in Ridgefield to an extent. Arguably, it's nice, but traffic's really tough there. Been that state highway, and it's 33. It's tough, but people love coming to New Canaan. You can walk everywhere. You have restaurants. You have diverse opportunities for shopping and entertainment and everything else. It's a gem, and I think preserving that, if not enhancing it, is something we'd certainly like to do. We got to think about parking. We lost parking spots. Free parking is the best parking, but you got to pay for the worst parking. So you got to pay for it on Elm, and it's free on Elm and Main, but or a few other streets, but it's free. But you have to pay everywhere else, which seems a bit
Premium parking for free.
Yeah, which seems a bit odd. But maybe topic for today. But issues of outdoor dining too, and where to put it. And so if you happen to be in one of those spots that has the bump out, you lucked out, and if you didn't, you don't. I haven't lucked out. So how to deal with that would prove to be really popular. People seem to like it. It's been it brings people to town because it expands the space. So how to deal with that? Other things we got to think about for the POCD, and we're look for input. Hoping that personally hoping that when the Playhouse gets up and running, it's going to further turbocharge the downtown. That's my expectation. Certainly should be. It looks nice so far, but wait till it opens, but I'm very hopeful. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. 1 or 2 brownies.
Yeah, take some, please. Take them, please, take them.
Time's dying.
They're gluten-free and nut-free, by the way, still. Any other comments on downtown at all, the business district? Sir, please come up and state your name again.
Leo Carl, 902 Silvermine Road.
Please wait to hear, otherwise we won't be unmiked.
Leo Carl, 902 Silvermine Road.
Thank you.
Sorry to grab the mic again, but I'm compelled after comments about historic districts that I just want to share publicly. I'm an owner of a home in the proposed Churchill district on Seminary Street, 88 Seminary Street to be exact. And I want to say that I'm all for historic preservation. I really believe in retaining certain historic, buildings. But as a private property owner, I think it's an affront to allow a third party to come in and designate privately owned property without vetting it, informing the residents involved, or bringing them up to speed in any way, shape, or form. The residents of this proposed Churchill district, this is just a story to help us look forward to any other proposed districts. The first time that we heard about it, there was already an application put into Hartford. And a representative from the state came down, and we had a meeting in this very room. And by that time, emotions were tied in knots, and people felt like they were being told what they could and couldn't do with their property in the future. I think there's probably some really good merits to it, but any effort to change the designation of privately owned property, it's easier to do for the town to take town-owned property like Waveney Park and apply for preservation, because that's open public space. But when you have privately owned property that's invested in, whether it's a commercial property owner or a residential. I think it's morally important to bring those property owners into the conversation very much up front, and almost have it be an election, whether you want to have your property be part of that. And I just say, the way the state and National Historic Register is written, from what I understand, if an area is designated or nominated for this registry, it's assumed that 100% of the property owners are in favor of that designation. And in order to register your opposition, you have to actively write a letter to oppose it. So if 150 property owners are listed in a district, you have to get, it's sort of the reverse of what you would think. You're not acknowledging that you're in favor of it. You have to voice your opposition to it, and it's coming from a third party. So from a town, I think the way that New Canaan always operates, I would encourage us, if we're thinking about anything like that in the future, that would be a grassroots effort to bring the actual property owners involved to the table and have a discussion. I'll flip back to the parking issue and traffic, and you mentioned, John, the Playhouse coming online, and I think that will bring another wave of traffic to town. And I understand that building a parking structure is roughly about $100,000 a spot from a construction standpoint. So I would encourage us to start thinking about, if someone's trying to add a unit of housing in the magic circle where there's not a specific parking requirement, that if we started a fund that said, if you're going to create a unit of demand for parking, it's $100,000 price tag to add to the cost of that development. And if that money starts getting pulled up, it'd help the town have some funds available to actually do something with parking. Because you can't just create parking places. They don't just come out of thin air. One advantage is a residential parking space is typically used at night and on weekends. And a commercial downtown parking place is typically used during working hours from early morning to late afternoon. So there can be overlap between merchant shopping parking places and residential parking places where there can be a soft overlap. It's going to be crunch times when both are needed at the same time, but there's some creative solutions. People do love to come to New Canaan, but they love it a lot more when they can come to New Canaan and park someplace close to where they want to go. And I think if we look at the POCD and thoughtfully think about ways we can make the downtown even more walkable than it is, direct connections from parking spots to the shopping streets, and also really take a look at signage for downtown for circulation. We don't have very good wayfinding in our town in comparison to many other towns that I've been to. There's some great examples. I can think of Burlington, Vermont, Hanover, New Hampshire, where when you're going into those towns, it's pretty easy, even for a first-time visitor, to navigate to where there's parking available. And we know inherently, our residents know where the parking is, but visitors do not. And so thinking about a master plan in our POCD about wayfinding, getting to downtown New Canaan, and then easily finding parking available. Because there's a lot of days there are parking spaces available. They're invisible to the eye when you're driving down Elm Street. You just got to know how to find them, how to get to them. So again, trying to focus the conversation on things that we could look forward to trying to do in the next decade, like it's part of advancing downtown. We do have, our downtown is definitely, it's a quintessential New England downtown. It's probably the closest, I would say, traditional New England downtown to Metro New York that there is. I mean, you'd have to go Ridgefield, maybe similar in some respects, but there's no main highway that cuts through our downtown. Our downtown business district is the center of a donut around all the residential properties in town, and it really is very unique, and we should treasure it and should make it accessible as possible. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone on Zoom? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Turner, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Carl. I totally agree with everything you're saying. I am a little puzzled by, the parking issue. You have a lot of people that come to your establishment. They don't do this by signs. They do it by an app, Wayfind, Waze, and I'm not sure that we need to pollute our town with more signage. And I just want to raise the point that I'm not sure I agree with your need for additional signage about parking, and that we can't rely on our apps that most people use. Find your establishment and find a place to park.
Maybe there's a New Canaan app we need, or I'm not joking here, but
No, all our parking shows up on Google Maps.
I'm thinking of an app for New Canaan, maybe. I hear you on Google Maps, agree, yeah.
People do use maps, and I agree to navigate to where they're going, but if they want to go to my business, they put in our address and it brings them to my front door. And I happen to have parking at my business. But in downtown New Canaan, the vast majority of businesses do not have on-site parking. They have, if they're lucky, they're on Elm Street and they have one space in front of their store, but that's going to be filled when the person gets there. And it's not instinctive. I had a group of people meeting in one of the conference rooms at the library. And when you Google New Canaan Library, it gives you their address on Main Street. The parking lot is not readily findable on navigation.
It shows up on Google Maps as, actually shows up as New Canaan Library parking, spot on.
Okay. I looked the other day and I was not able to find it, so
Yeah.
I couldn't find an address. I found an address on South Avenue for that lot.
Yeah.
But there's nothing on Maple Street. But I'm not so much saying physical like neon signs, but simple wayfinding signs that you see in other places. And yes, electronic, easy to find parking. There's different apps. I think St. Aloysius Church uses a Boxcar app,
Yeah.
and that's very easy, but not everybody has Boxcar and not all the parking is tied to that. So perhaps New Canaan, part of a paragraph could go into the POCD for research on, technology. If we got all of our parking on one app or one, I think it would be helpful. So.
But, sir, with all due respect, and I find it's difficult to be, a critic, but you have a very large parking lot, and your parking lot is advertising cars. You park cars every square inch that you have. You are suggesting that signs will suddenly dissipate, make this problem go away, as far as your visitors trying to find a place to park? Couldn't you designate a portion of your showroom?
I'm not talking nothing that I've said has anything to do with my business. I'm not asking for any wayfinding to my business. I don't need any wayfinding. I'm talking about visitors to downtown New Canaan.
Yes.
So discount, it's got nothing to do with Carl Chevrolet or my business's parking. And maybe others will disagree. I personally think that we could do a better job.
Our town has been very successful with visitors and finding where they need to go.
I think there's something to be said about, we talked earlier about the scale of certain parts of town, trying to maintain that and trying to maintain the look, touch, and feel of what we've grown to love about this town. There's also something about the unclutteredness of town when it comes to something like the signage, right? I don't agree that we need a popcorn trail of signs leading us to parking lots. I think, you know, we've really only got 4 or 5 major parking lots around the center of town, which given our scale, doesn't take a lot of time to figure out where they are. And there's something about the charm of that. And there's a reason we don't allow sidewalk signage, you know, sandwich boards, any kind of banners or anything like that in town, because it maintains that uncluttered look and feel that gives it the charm that we have. Yeah, just my opinion. Uh-oh.
More brownies?
Follow up on that.
Please. Is Tiger still hungry?
I'm gonna bring back 2 this time. Wayfinding is
State your name
something.
again. for the
Oh,
record.
sorry, Tucker Murphy, Garage Line Mechanic. Wayfinding is definitely something that's come up over, I even remember back to the market demand study back in 2011. And I think, for what it's worth, I think it is something worthy of some more analysis as part of the POCD process. I do hear it all the time. I completely agree that we don't want to have all the signage. I like the way you phrased it, Dan, but I do hear a lot of the folks that come in, especially visited the Glass House, the visitor center. I see them walking around. I mean, we do have apps. There's explorenewcanaan.com, which has a whole parking map there to tell you where it's going to be. But I think we could improve the wayfinding and the signage for the visitor who doesn't actually know, and not just parking. I think there's ways to say, you know, 123 is that way. I don't want to see one of those boards with this and that. But I do think that we could improve it. I think those of us that live here understand it and know it, but I think it's something that I'd like to see us.
Fair enough.
check a little bit more. 1 or 2 this time, Tiger. Keeps working. Bring him back.
Yes, Ken.
Turner.
Yes, I'll use Valley Road as an example. Silver Hill has added 3 signs at critical intersections that have a graphic that says Silver Hill and an arrow. It happens at places that don't really make sense. The one that's most compelling is at the northern end of Valley Road, where it turns into a very large establishment. And it would almost appear that this is the entrance to Silver Hill. It's not. And, you know, I just don't understand the reason or, you know, how that really helps people comprehend where they're going. Again, it's visual pollution, and it's happening more and more throughout the New Canaan. We have the speed limit signs, the crosswalk signs. At what point do we stop until we become a sign community? I just, again, you know, there are some reasons for doing this, but you know, I think we're getting carried away. And I think that this falls under that understanding.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone on Zoom like to speak on this topic? Hands raised. No one on Zoom. Anyone else in the room would like to speak on the downtown? I'm going to open up. Anyone want to speak on any topic at all, just to be sure I catch everything relevant to us, not anything else. We're going to stay in our lane here.
I'm sorry.
Wait, we have a citizen who wants to speak.
Mr. Chris, I just have one more.
Oh yeah, please. No, please sit down.
I just have really.
No, wait, don't wait. Please finish, Commissioner Turner.
I'm sorry. People don't see signs. It's not they're driving, they quickly pass them, they ignore them. It's not the best solution. Thank you.
And Mr. Commissioner Turner, I'll just highlight, I think the comments are noted, and again, we're just accepting public input, and we'll internally discuss at future meetings what is and isn't included in the plan, but it's noted, your comments.
Please state your name again for the record.
Sarah Vandervoort, 439 Cheese Spring Road. Just sitting here, and I know that, sometimes things get off topic. People speak at the wrong times, but you said anything that anybody thought.
Relevant
might
to
be
us, just catch all.
Okay. We've been talking
Don't talk about the schools, it's not our area.
We've been talking about a lot about affordable housing today, and about the cost to, it seems like it's the cost of land plus around 600,000. What about buying existing properties? I mean, I've just sat here and looked at the cost of a property on Heritage Hill. I mean, it might be cheaper to buy some of the units at Heritage Hill and turn them into affordable housing than to build it. I mean, it's just a thought that comes to me anyway. I mean, that could be a lot cheaper than building it, and I have a few units there. I mean, it's existing, it's got parking, it's near downtown. Might not go well with the other people at Heritage Hill, but just a thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else like to speak on housing or the downtown? Anyone on Zoom like to? Okay, it's the third and last call. Okay. We will move on to the second item on our agenda. Any other business that may come before the subcommittee? I can't think of anything.
Nope.
Okay, minutes approval. I think everyone has received and the minutes. Any commentary on the minutes? Nope, no commentary. Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Commissioner Nielsen, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Any further discussion? No further discussion? Okay. We'll vote. Commissioner Benton?
You can just do all in favor.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. And that's it. We will adjourn. Thanks for coming.
Nicely done.